Hello everyone, today we're going to be going over the entire math section from an official SHSAT practice exam. For those of you that don't know, the SHSAT has been moved to a digital format. That means that for everyone taking the exam this November 2025 and onwards, you will be taking the test on a computer. Because of that, the Department of Education has released 2 official digital practice exams. I'm going to be going over the entire math section of one of them to help get you ready for this digital format and to show how this new digital exam works. So when you first log on to the test, this is the information you're going to be greeted with. You're going to press this next button, start the exam, and I'm going to quickly jump all the way to the start of the math section. The question starts with, in a scale diagram, 0.125 inch represents 125 feet. So how many inches represent 1 foot? So a scale is essentially something you apply when you want to represent something big on something that's small. So for example, if I wanted to draw out a skyscraper, skyscrapers are like 1,000 feet. If I wanted to draw a skyscraper on a paper, I'm not going to get 1,000-foot long paper. I'm just going to say that every inch on this paper represents 1,000 feet. Same thing here. In this case, every 0.125 of an inch represents 125 feet. Okay, whenever you have a problem with scale diagrams and they want you to figure out, oh, well, how many inches is a foot? How many feet are 1 inch? Write it down like this. First unit, second unit, colon in between. Then, how many inches represent a foot? Whatever unit they're asking for, in this case inches, put an X underneath that unit. And then, when they're asking you, well, what does it represent? Put the number down next to the same unit, right? So how many inches, well, that's X inches, represent 1 foot. We have a number, we put that down under this unit. So we have 0.125 inches to 125 feet and X inches to 1 foot. Next, all you have to do is just cross multiply. So multiply the top by the bottom. 1 times 0.125 is 0.125. And finally, X times 125 is 125X. To solve this, all you have to do is just divide both sides by 125. And you're going to get that X is equal to 0.001. All right, which is going to be choice A. If you follow this method on any scale diagram problem, you're bound to get it right, okay? So again, how many blank units, put an X underneath the unit that they're asking about, represents, so how many X units represent 1 foot, then write down the number underneath the other unit, and then always just cross multiply, you're gonna get it right, all right? So if this was the real exam, you'd go ahead and you'd click A, and then you'd click this next arrow to get to the next question. Next question gives us a unit conversion, so we wanna go from 55 miles per hour into feet per second, okay? Now, whenever you see 55 miles per hour, that's the same thing as saying miles over hour. In any way, anything per anything, feet per minute, seconds per seconds, right? Meters per second. This per pretty much just acts as a big fraction symbol. Anything to the left of the per goes on the numerator, anything to the right goes in the denominator. So 55 miles per hour is actually 55 miles divided by 1 hour, okay? And I bring this up because they want you to convert this into feet per second. Feet per second is just feet over seconds. So in order to get this conversion, I'm going to have to get rid of miles and I'm going to have to get rid of hours. In order to convert miles into feet, we multiply by 5,280. Why? Because there's 502,080 feet in 1 mile. And if we look at the units here, if I have a mile in the numerator, a mile in the denominator, they're going to cancel out. It's the same thing as like if you multiply 3 over 2 times 2 over 1, right? The 2 and the 2 cancel out and they get replaced with 1. In either way, they don't exist. Those two numbers don't exist. In this case, the units don't exist. So when we're going from miles to feet, we're going to multiply by 5,280. This should also make sense. A mile is bigger than a feet. So 55 miles, if you want to convert 55 miles into feet, guess what? That resulting number has to be bigger than 55. So we're going to have to be multiplying, not dividing, and we're going to be multiplying by 5,280 to make this bigger number because there's more feet in 1 mile than there are miles in a foot. All right, so 55 times 5,280, that's our first step. If you want to look at this the official way, what we just did was we multiplied by feet over miles. We cancel out the miles. Now, we're left with feet over hours. We want feet per second. So we have to cancel out the hours. Now, in order for us to convert hours into seconds, just know that 1 hour is equal to 3,600 seconds. So I'm going to multiply this by 1 hour over 3,600 seconds. I have an hour in the numerator, hour in the denominator, and I'm left with 55 times 5,280 divided by 3,600, right? That's going to be our unit conversion in this case. Follow this method, you'll never get confused. First step, write out the final unit, feet per second. Second step, write out the starting unit, miles per hour. Then in the middle, your entire job is to figure out, well, am I going to put the feet in the numerator? Am I going to put the feet in the denominator? How do I figure that out? I look at what my starting unit is, and I look at what I have to cancel out. If I need to cancel out miles, I'm going to put feet in the numerator, miles in the denominator. After that, just look at the numbers and select the correct answer choice. In this case, this is going to line up with choice B, right? So we'll select B, and we'll be on our way. All right, this is something called dimensional analysis. You should learn this in 8th grade, so this should be familiar to you. But either way, if you wanted to think about it like this, we know we have 55 miles over 1 hour. We know 55 miles, if we just multiply that by 5,280, we get feet. And if we multiply an hour by 3,600 seconds, we get seconds, and then we get feet over seconds. So that's going to be the correct answer either way. All right, moving on to the next question. It says, or it asks us, for what value is 4w equal to 2w minus 8? All we have to do here is solve for w, so we can do that by moving it to one side. We're going to subtract 2w from both sides, and we get that 2w is equal to negative 8. Divide both sides by 2, and we get that w is equal to negative 4. All right, so all we have to do here, go ahead, and in this slot here, we can just type in negative 4. Okay, a virtual keyboard can pop up, or you can use the keyboard on the laptop that you're taking this exam with, right? So here, plug in negative 4, and we move on, all right? Now, this problem has a common trick that a lot of students are going to fall for. It says that a survey asks students which pets they have, and based on the results, the following statements are all true. 20 have cats, 23 have dogs, 3 have both cats and dogs, and 5 students have no cats or dogs. And they want us to know how many students were surveyed, or how many students did we ask these questions to. And the people that are going to get this wrong, they're going to say, oh, well, I'm just going to add up all the people to get the total number of people surveyed. And that is dead wrong, right? That is how you actually get this problem wrong. That's a trick. There's a trick to this, right? The trick to this is thinking about it as if you were in a classroom. So let's say you're in a classroom and your teacher asks you, okay, raise your hand if you have cats, all right? And you don't know what she's going to ask next. So raise your hand if you have cats. You raise your hand. The teacher counts, and she counts that 20 kids have their hands up. Then she's like, okay, put your hands down. Everyone that has a dog, raise your hand. And 23 students raise their hand. And then finally, she asks this question. She asks, who has both cats and dogs? And 3 students raise their hand. The issue now, these 3 students that raised their hand, they didn't know that cats and dogs were an option. So when they raised their hand when the teacher asks them if they had cats, because they're like, yeah, I have a cat. I also have a dog, but she asked me if I have a cat. Yeah, I have a cat. I'm going to raise my hand. And they raised their hand when the teacher asked about dogs. I have a cat and a dog. Yeah, I have a dog. I'm going to raise my hand as well. What that means is this teacher counted 3 extra hands here, and she also counted 3 extra hands here. Technically, these 3 students don't belong in this category or that category because they have their own category, right? So our job is to remove them from these 2 categories. So we're going to subtract both of these by 3, and we're going to get that only 17 kids actually have cats, and only 20 kids have dogs, because these 3 have their own special category that we're going to count them in. So finally, cats plus dogs have 3 people in it, right? These 3 people only belong to this category. They don't belong to the dogs. They don't belong to the cats. Finally, the teacher's going to ask, well, how many people didn't raise their hand at all? 5 people are going to say, I didn't raise my hand at all. Why? I don't have a cat or a dog, right? I don't have any pets. So now this is technically how many people were actually surveyed. It's 17 plus 20 plus 3 plus 5. 17 plus 3 is 20. 20 plus 20 is 40. And 40 plus 5 is 45. And that's going to be the correct answer here. All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to type in 45. All right. This problem says the sum of the numbers x, y, and z, so x plus y plus z, is 50. And we know the ratio of x to y is 1 to 4. Or I can just write it like this. X to y is the same thing as saying 1 to 4. We know that the ratio of y to z is 4 to 5. Okay? So in order to solve this problem, you need to know how to rewrite ratios. If I have a ratio of like 2 to 3, that's the same thing as saying 2 over 3. Ratios can always be expressed as fractions. So if I have the ratio of x to y, that's the same thing as saying x over y. Okay? Now, we know that the ratio of x to y, which is the same thing as saying x over y, is 1 to 4. In math, is means equal. So x to y is equal to 1 to 4. we know that a 1 to 4 ratio is equal to 1 over 4. That means that x to y is equal to 1 over 4 because x to y is 1 to 4. X to y is x over y, is means equals, and 1 to 4 means 1 over 4. Now this is important because now I can solve for the value of x, and I'll tell you why later. So to solve for the value of x, I can just cross multiply here, and I have x times 4 to get us 4x, and that's equal to y times 1, which gives us to y. So we know that y is equal to 4x. Now, remember that I want to solve the value of y. That's important because I can't solve the value of y unless every single variable here is y. There's no way of solving an equation with multiple variables unless you know what those variables are equal to. In this case, I don't know what x or z is equal to. But if I know that 4x is equal to y, and if I divide both sides by 4, I technically know that x is equal to y over 4, and I know what x is equal to in terms of y. So now I can plug y over 4 in for x, and I could do y over 4 plus y plus z is equal to 50. But this still isn't good enough because z is an unknown variable, and I don't know what z is equal to. I know what x is equal to y over 4, and I can combine these two y's together, but I don't know what z is equal to. So now I look at the second ratio. Y to z is the same thing as saying y over z. First number goes into the numerator, last number goes into the denominator, is same thing as saying equals, and 4 to 5 is the same thing as saying 4 over 5. So this is the second ratio translated into math, and this is purely a math translation. So now I can cross multiply again. Y times 5 is 5y, and that's equal to 4z. Remember, I want to figure out the value of z, so I'm going to divide both sides by 4, and I know that 5y over 4 is equal to z. Now I can plug that into z, and I get y over 4 plus y plus 5y over 4 is equal to 50. And now I can solve this problem because I know the value for y. I have all of the same variables down here, so I can combine them and then divide by whatever the coefficient is. So now what I can do is I can just combine these fractions. Remember that to combine fractions like 1 over 4 and 5 over 4, you just need to make sure they have the same denominator. If they have the same denominator, add their numerator and keep the denominator the same. That means that 1 over 4 plus 5 over 4 is just 1 plus 5 over 4. You keep the denominator the same, you add the top. So if I have y plus 4 plus 5y over 4 plus y, these two have a denominator of 4, so I can just add them, and I get 6y over 4. Now, I'm adding that to y over 1. Now, I have to turn these two to have the same denominator. So how do I turn 1 into 4? Well, I just multiply the top and the bottom by 4. So now I have 6y over 4 plus 4y over 4. That's equal to 10y over 4. I just add the numerator, keep the denominator the same. Now, 10y over 4 is equal to 50 over 1, and I can just cross multiply. 10 times y is 10y, and 5 times 50 is 200. And I can divide both sides by 10 to get that y is equal to 20. And that's going to be our correct answer, D. So, in summary, all you needed to know here was how to translate this from math into English by figuring out how to write a ratio in terms of a fraction, which it always can be written in terms of. So now this is choice D. All right, the set of possible values of m is 5, 7, and 9. What is the set of possible values of k if 2k is equal to m plus 3? So we know that m could equal to 5 or 7 or 9. It's possible, which is why all three of these are possibilities. We know that 2k is always going to be equal to m plus 3. Now they want us to find what k could equal, right? And I say could equal because it depends on whatever m is, which is why there's multiple answers or multiple numbers in each answer choice, right? Because technically the value of k depends on whatever m is. M has 3 different values that it could be, which means that k has 3 different values that it could be. Remember that this equation gives you the value of 2k. I want the value of k only. So how do I turn 2k into k? I can just divide both sides by 2, and I get that k is equal to m plus 3 over 2. The next thing I needed to do is just plug in m into this equation. So when m is 5, I get 5 plus 3 over 2, which is 4. When m is 7, I get 7 plus 3 over 2, which is 5. And then finally, when m is 9, I get 9 plus 3 over 2, which is 6. So k has to equal to 4 or 5 or 6, which is choice B right here, 4, 5, and 6. Go ahead, choose B, and move on. Now, this equation just wants us to simplify this really easy. So here we have 7 plus 3n plus 6 minus 4n plus 8. Now, in order to simplify this, I need to remove the parentheses. The only way that I can remove the parentheses is if there's nothing in front of it. And by nothing, I mean a plus symbol. Now, is there a plus symbol in front of this parentheses? Yes, so I can just remove them and rewrite it as 7 plus 3n plus 6 minus, in parentheses, 4n plus 8. Now, is there something in front of this parentheses? Yes, the answer is yes, because it's not a plus symbol. If there's a minus sign in front of the parentheses, that means that you have to multiply everything on the inside by -1, technically, in order to remove it, because there's an invisible -1 here that we just don't write out. So, in order to break this out of the parentheses, we multiply everything on the inside by -1. We get 7 plus 3n plus 6 minus 4n minus 8, okay? And now we can combine like terms. So here I have 7 and here I have 6. 7 plus 6 is 13, okay? And I could just write everything else down. So drop down the 3n. So that's 13 plus 3n minus 4n minus 8. Now, the other like terms I have -8 and I have 13. If I read it from left to right, which is how I should read it, I get that this is equal to 13 minus 8. And 13 minus 8 is 5, right? Because we look at the sign from here, 13 minus 8, combine those like terms to get 5. Now I'm left with 5 plus 3n minus 4n. And now I can combine the last like term, which are the variables. So you can never combine a number with a variable, only variable with variable, and number with number. So 3n minus 4n, well, think about it as 3 minus 4. 3 minus 4 is equal to -1. So that means that 3n minus 4n has to equal to -n, right? Whenever it's a 1, just replace the 1 with the variable. So this is 5 minus n, which is going to be choice A, right? All right. Moving on, it says in a certain school, course grades range from 0 to 100. We know that Adriana took 4 courses and her mean course grade was 90. All right, Roberto took 5 courses and they have the same sum of course grades. So how do you take a mean? A mean is just an average. And an average is taken by adding everything up and dividing by how many of it there is. So in the course, or in the context of grades, if I want to find my course average, I just add up all the grades that I got from my courses together. So for example, Adriana took 4 courses. So to find her average, she just took the grade for course 1 plus course 2 plus course 3 and finally plus course 4. And then she divided it by however many items she added. So here she added 1, 2, 3, and 4 items. So she divided this by 4 to get her mean. Okay, and it turned out that her average or her mean was 90. Okay, if I wanted to find the average number of like ice cream cones that I eat per a day, so let's say on Monday I ate 2, on Tuesday I ate 3, and on Wednesday I ate 3, and on Thursday I ate 1. So here I have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 1. That's going to give us 9, and then I ate them over 4 days, so my average is going to be 9 divided by 4, right? So I add everything that I did over how many things I added. In this case, she did her courses, right? She completed them, she added them together, she divided it by however many she did. She took 4. Now, we know that both students have the same sum of course grades, which gives me a hint that I want to find the sum of the course grades. Guess what? The sum of the course grades, just all of them added up together. Sum means addition. So this is the sum, okay? It's the numerator. And if I look at this fraction, what I can do, I have 2 fractions equal to one another, so my favorite thing, cross multiply. If this is my sum, I can just rewrite this as the sum of my course grades divided by 4 is equal to 90 over 1. The sum times 1 is just going to be itself, so the sum is just the sum. Anything times 1 is itself, and that's going to equal to 360. So she added all her courses together and she got 360. Now, Roberto took 5 courses, so if I wanted to find his average, I'm going to have to find the sum, again, and now divide it by 5, okay? But remember that Roberto and Adriana have the same sum. So Adriana's sum was 360. Roberto's sum also has to be 360, but because he took 5 courses, his denominator increases by 1, and now 360 divided by 5 is equal to 72, so that has to be his average. This is a common question on the SHSAT. They give you the average of one person, and then you have to find the average of the other person. The trick is almost always to find the sum of whatever component they were adding up, okay, like we did in this problem. Now, Kevin and Liam collect lamps. They collect stamps, guys, stamps. Liam has twice as many stamps as Kevin. So let's translate this from English into math, right? So Liam has, whenever you see has, that's the same thing as equals. So here, Liam, or the number of stamps that Liam has, equals, because we replaced that with has, and now he has twice as many stamps. And whenever you see twice as many, thrice as many, 1/2 as many, that means multiply by the number. So twice means 2, as many means multiply. And finally, Kevin is the recipient of that multiplication. So the number of stamps that Liam has is equal to 2 times Kevin's stamps, right? Or 2 times K or 2 times Kevin. All right. If you wanted to further translate this into math, you could just say that L for Liam is equal to 2K, K for Kevin. Okay. Remember, twice as means multiply by 2, and we're multiplying Kevin's stamps by 2. Then we know that Liam, which we already said is L, Liam gives 8 of his stamps to Kevin. So if you give something away, are you going to be increasing or are you going to be decreasing however many of that item you have? You're going to be decreasing, right? So if Liam gives 8 of his stamps, that means that L minus 8. He loses 8 stamps. Now, if Liam lost 8 stamps, that means that Kevin had to have gained 8 stamps, right? Because he gives them to Kevin. So they're going away from him and they're going straight to Kevin. And when they go to Kevin, Liam still has 12 more stamps than Kevin. So when Liam gave away those 8 stamps, the issue is he still has 12 more, which means that Kevin has 12 less. Okay? And because Kevin has 12 less, in order to really make them equal to one another, I can take away 12 more from Liam and give them to Kevin, or I can just give Kevin 12 more to equalize them out. So now I'm left with the following equation. I know that L minus 8 has to equal to K plus 20, and I know that L is equal to 2K. And this problem tells us or asks us the exact thing, right? They want us to select the correct answer from the drop-down. Here's the drop-down. It's like a multiple choice question. You have multiple answers. So now we know that L is equal to blank K. We know it's 2K, so we put down a 2 here, right? Then it says after Liam gives 8 stamps to Kevin, the equation becomes L minus 8, which we already wrote down here, and that's equal to K plus 20, right? Liam loses 8 stamps, Kevin gains 8 stamps. In order to make Kevin's amount of stamps equal to Liam's amount of stamps, he needs 12 more. And I noticed that I wrote that incorrectly down here, so let me fix that. So Kevin still needs 12 more. That's why we added 12 here. So he needs 12 more. Liam needs 12 less. Okay? So that's equal to K plus 20. And finally, they want us to solve these two equations. So the way that we solve an equation, if we have two variables, we saw this before, we just plug in a variable, right? We need to make all the variables the same one. In this case, I already know that L is equal to 2K, and I have an L right here. So if L is the same thing as saying 2K, I could just replace this L with 2K. So now I have 2K minus 8 is equal to K plus 20. And what I can do here is I can subtract K from both sides, and I get that K minus 8 is equal to 20. If I add 8 on both sides, I know that K is equal to 28. Now, is this my answer? No, because they want us to know how many stamps Liam started with. So we know that Liam started with twice as many as Kevin, or 2 times K. And if K is equal to 28, Liam has to equal to 2 times 28, which is 56. That's going to be the correct answer here, right? So 56 stamps. All right. So in the figure above, PQRS is a parallelogram, and what's the value of X? So whenever I do these problems, I like to see what X is a part of. And I see it's a part of this corner, right? So let's zoom in onto that corner. So this is the parallelogram, this is the corner. I know that this is angle Q. I know that this is a 90-degree angle because it has a square in a corner, right? This means 90 degrees. And finally, angle X is right here. Now, whenever you have an angle or angles that complete a full circle, all of them have to equal to 360 degrees. Notice here how, if I add all of these angles together and if I just trace them with my pencil, I make a circle, which means that X plus 90 plus the measure of angle Q have to equal to 360. This is guaranteed to be on your exam, right? They're going to ask for a shape. The shape's going to have a corner, or they're just going to give you two lines, and they're going to give you angles that, when you add them together, form a circle. You need to know that when you add them together, they don't just form a circle, they add up to 360. So we need to know that in a parallelogram, opposite angles are equal. So that means that Q has to be equal to S, okay? We know that S is right here. We also know that if I were to zoom in on this image right here, this part is equal to 72 degrees, and then over here we have S. So S has to equal to 108 degrees. Why? Well, S and this 72 lie on a straight line, a flat line. The flat line always has an angle measure of 180 degrees. So if I have 72 degrees over here, I must have 108 degrees on this side, because 108 plus 72 is equal to 180, which is the measure of the flat line. So I need S to equal 108. Now, if S is equal to 108, that means that Q is equal to 108, and I have 108 plus 90 plus q is equal to 360, and 198 plus q is equal to 360. So we'll quickly do 360 minus 198. This becomes 2, this becomes 5, this becomes 10. Sorry, this becomes 15. 15 minus 9 is 6, and then 2 minus 1 is 1. So angle x is 162 degrees, right? That's the correct measure. So 1, 6, and 2. All right, moving on. So we know that the three expressions are given below. We have negative 2 times 2.5 n plus 4, 5 minus n, and 3 times 2n plus 7. Which one of these is equivalent to the sum of these three expressions? So the sum is just adding everything together, right? So these three expressions, the sum of them has to be 5 minus n plus 3 times 2n plus 7 plus negative 2 times 2.5n plus 4. And notice here how there's going to be two correct answers. And if I look at my answer choices here, 4 of my answer choices are just rewriting this with all the like terms combined, right? Or they're writing this expression without the parentheses, essentially, with the parentheses removed. And then the other three choices down here, or the other two choices down here, are actually giving us a value. So these 4 choices are telling us, well, this entire expression is equal to this once you remove the parentheses. How do I know that? Well, I remove the parentheses. These bottom 2 choices are giving us the actual value of this expression when we fully simplify it. So how about we do both, right? Let's break this out of the parentheses first. I chose to add them in this direction with the 5n first and then the 6n because that's how all of my answer choices work. So you could have started off by adding negative 2 times 2.5n plus 4 plus 5 minus n. I didn't do this because I know that on the SHSAT I need to save time, and if I look at my answer choices, they all have 5n followed by 6n second. Okay, now how did I know I have 6n? That's because whenever you have a number outside of the parentheses, in order to get rid of the parentheses, you have to multiply that outside number by whatever's on the inside. So here 5 minus n doesn't have anything, isn't even in parentheses, so I can just write that as is. But here I have 3 on the outside, so I have to multiply 3 times 2n to get 6n, and then 3 times 7 to get positive 21, right? And that's how we got these two options right here. Then I have a second set of parentheses, but now outside of it, I have negative 2 written on the outside. So now I have to multiply everything on the inside by, you guessed it, negative 2. Not just 2, but negative 2. So negative 2 times 2.5n is negative 5n, and negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. Now, which answer choice does this line up with? This is going to line up perfectly with this top choice right here, okay? So that's one out of the 2 options. The next option is to combine all like terms and actually get the value of this, right? So if I combine like terms, over here I have negative n plus 6n, or negative 1 plus 6, which is equal to positive 5. If I slap a variable on these, the math doesn't change, it's just equal to 5n. So we have 5 minus 5n plus 21 minus 5n minus 8. And notice here I have, in this case, positive 5n minus 5n. So positive 5 minus 5 is equal to 0. If I slap on a variable, nothing changes. 5n minus 5n is equal to 0. So they actually cancel out, and I'm left with 5 plus 21 minus 8. 5 plus 21 is going to be 26, and 26 minus 8 is 16. Or sorry, it's 18. This is 18, which is going to be this choice right here. All right. So the top choice and the second to last choice, correct answers. All right. So this question says, in the pyramid above, each triangular face has the same area, and the base MNPQ is a square that measures 8 centimeters on each side. Okay. So here, this is 8 centimeters. This is also 8 centimeters. And I know that if I were to take the area of this triangle right here, this face, it would be the same area as this face, essentially, right? Now, if the length of RS, which is this right here, is 6 centimeters, what is the surface area of the pyramid excluding the base? So the surface area is if you just combine the area of whatever's facing the outside. So if I look at this pyramid right here, I know that it has 4 faces. It has 4 faces because it has a square base, and then from the square base, there's 1 triangle, there's 2 triangles, there's 3 triangles, and finally there's 4 triangles, if we're looking at it like at a top-down view, or like a bird's eye view, right? Now, each one of these triangles looks something like this. It looks something like this, R, P, Q, and S. It's actually made up of 2 smaller triangles. and it's made up of two smaller triangles that look like this, right? Has a right angle, has a height of 6, and finally it has a base of, well, this big triangle, each face has a base of 8 because the square is 8 units long. Remember that this right angle is going to cut this side in half, so it's made up of two small triangles that measure 6 by 4. Now, the area of a triangle is equal to 1/2 times the base times the height. The height is 6, the base is 4, and 4 times 6 is 24, multiplied by 1/2 is 12. So each one of these faces is made up of two triangles that each have an area of 12 and 12. That means that each face has a total area of 24, and I have 4 of those faces. So 24 times 4 is going to equal to 96, so the total surface area has to be 96 square centimeters, or centimeters squared. All right, the perimeter of a rectangle is 510 centimeters. The ratio of the length to width is 3 to 2, and what are the dimensions of this rectangle? So remember, length to width is the same thing as saying length over width. Remember, is the same thing as saying equals, and then 3 to 2 is the same thing as saying 3 over 2, right? So keep this relationship in mind. You could have also done the following. Length to width is the same thing as saying 3 to 2. This is the same method that I did on the scale drawing problem in the beginning of this video, and you could just cross multiply to get the individual values. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, sorry guys. So if I were to draw this rectangular field out, I know that the length is the longest side and the width is the shorter side. And I know that 2w plus 2l is the perimeter, right? The perimeter is the total distance around the shape calculated by adding the two lengths and the two widths together to get a total of 510 in this case. Now, do you understand why I was writing this relationship down? I hope you do, because we know that 2 times the length, or 2l, is equal to 3 times the width, right? The same thing you could do here, right? Cross multiply here. 2 times length is 2l, 3 times width is equal to 3w. So now what can I do? Well, I have this equation, 2w plus 2l is equal to 510. I can't solve for w or l if I have both of them here, so I need to plug one of them in. Luckily, I know that 2 times the length is equal to 3 times the width. So wherever I see a 2l in this equation, I can replace it with a 3w. So here I see a 2l, and I'm just going to rewrite that as 3w. And now I have 2w plus 3w is equal to 510. 5w is equal to 510. So w has to equal, so let's see, 510 divided by 5, that's 1. That's going to be 102. I did it in my head. So w is equal to 102. That's the width. Okay, and if I look at my answer choices, there's only one answer choice that has the width as 102 centimeters, which is B. So technically I could stop doing my math from here and select B. But let's say that you didn't stop from here. If you know that W is equal to 102, you know that 2 times the length is equal to 3 times the width, right? So in this case, you know that 1 times the length, if I divide both sides by 2, 1 times the length, or just the length, is equal to 3 times the width divided by 2. So if you actually wanted to find the length as well, you just do 3 times 102 divided by 2, which would have given you 153 either way. So that's the correct answer here. Remember, write your ratios out. You can either write it on top of the letters, like so, like we did in the first problem on this video, or you can go ahead and stick to the 3 over 2 fraction rule and cross multiply. Both involve cross multiplication, sorry guys. All right, next it asks us which number line below shows the solution to this inequality. And the inequality here is -4 is less than x over 2, which is less than 2, okay? So some inequality rules, first of all. Whenever you have a less than or a greater than sign, that always corresponds to an open circle. Whenever you have a less than or equal to sign or a greater than or equal to sign, that corresponds to a closed circle on a number line, okay? Just some rules here. The other thing is, whenever we want to draw a number line of an inequality, we always put it in terms of x on its own. In this case, we can't get the inequality here because it's in terms of x over 2. So how do I get x over 2 and turn it into x over 1, right? Or just regular x? Well, I could just multiply, and this works for any sort of fraction. I could just multiply the numerator and the denominator by whatever the denominator is. So I can multiply this by 2 over 2, right? Sorry, 2 over 1. So remember, guys, if you ever have like x over 2 or x over 4, and you want to get rid of the denominator, multiply the numerator by the denominator. What this does, 2 and 2 are the same number, so they cancel out and turn into 1. And now we have 1 over 1 times x over 1, which is the same thing as x over 1, or just x. But if I multiply x by 2 over 1, I have to do that to everything inside of this inequality. So that means I'm multiplying negative 4 by 2 to get negative 8, and I'm multiplying 2 by 2 to get 4. So now negative 8 is less than x, which is less than 4. So x has to fall between negative 8 and 4. And essentially, if we look at this number line, anywhere where you see a shaded region is where x can go. So x is limited between negative 8 and 4, and which choice says that? Well, it's going to be choice D, right? Because it's saying that x, the shaded line, exists starting at negative 8, and it can go anywhere all the way up to 4. It stops at 4 because it can't be bigger than 4. Wherever you see a shaded line is where you see the answer. Choice C is wrong because it says that the answer exists after 4. Remember that x has to be less than 4. It stops before 4. Here it's going on after 4. Choice B is wrong because it's saying that x has to be between negative 4 and, let's see, this is 2. So this choice is a trap answer because a lot of students wouldn't know that it has to be in terms of x, not x over 2, and they would just select this. And choice A is just flat out wrong. So remember, it has to be in terms of x, and wherever you see a shaded line, that's where x can exist. So x can only exist between negative 8 and 4. It can't exist outside of this range because then it would be less than 8 and it would be greater than 4, which it can't be. All right. Moving on. So correct answer is D. All right, the sum of two consecutive integers is negative 15. If 1 is added to the smaller integer and 2 is subtracted from the larger integer, what is the product of the resulting integers? Okay, so first of all, what is an integer? It's a whole number that can be negative or positive. And by whole number, I mean no decimals. So for example, negative 3, negative 2, 1, 3, 50, 500. They are all integers. What makes them integers? The fact that they're not 4.5 or 4.9 or 3.7. Whenever you see a decimal, that's no longer an integer, unless it's like 5.0. Then it's an integer because the 0.0 can just be removed to get 5, which is a whole number. All right? So that's what an integer is. It's a whole number. Now, what does consecutive mean? Consecutive means one after the other. So for example, a consecutive number or consecutive numbers could be 1 and 2 because they come one after the other. A list can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 because it's just happening one after the other. And it turns out this is true for any sort of consecutive number, right? It's just 1 plus the previous one, okay? So for example, how do I get to 2 from 1? How do I find the consecutive integer from here or the next integer? Well, I just add 1 and I get 2. Now, how do I find the number after 2? I just add 1. That's the rule. So we don't know what these two integers are, so we can just say that they're x. Now, if x is an integer, the next integer has to be x plus 1, right? We showed that here. 1 is the first integer. Then how do you get the second integer ever? Well, you just add 1 to get 2. The same thing goes even when you don't know what the variable is. So when you have two unknown consecutive integers, always write them as x and x plus 1. Now, remember, we're looking at the sum of these consecutive integers. So x and x plus 1 are consecutive integers, and now we're looking at the sum. The sum means the total, so now we have to add them. We add x plus 1, and we get negative 15. So now we know that 2x plus 1 is equal to negative 15. If I subtract negative 1 on both sides, I get that 2x is equal to negative 16. Don't fall for the trap. Negative 15 minus 1 is equal to negative 16. If I'm $15 in debt and I owe someone an extra dollar, I'm $16 in debt now. It grows. That means that x has to equal to negative 8. Now, remember, I have two numbers here, right? I have x, which is negative 8, and I have x plus 1. Negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. Okay, now they're saying if 1 is added to the smaller integer and 2 is subtracted from the larger integer, what's the product? Product means multiplication. But now I need to know where to add and where to subtract. We're adding 1 to the smaller integer, so which one here is smaller, negative 8 or negative 7? For those of you that said negative 7, you're wrong. Sure, 7 is smaller than 8. But when you assign negative symbols, whatever is closest to 0 is actually bigger. So if I look at the number line, negative 7 is right here, negative 8 is over here. Because negative 7 is closer to 0, it's actually bigger. And you can think about it like this. If you have a bank account that's $7 in debt versus a bank account that's $8 in debt, who's more in debt? Obviously, the bank account with $8 of debt. That means that that bank account is worth less money So negative 8 has to be the smaller integer. So we're adding 1 to negative 8, and we're going to get negative 7. Then we're subtracting 2 from the larger integer. So negative 7 is the bigger one. If we subtract 2 from negative 7 minus 2 is negative 9. And negative 7 times negative 9 is positive 36. Remember, negative times negative means positive. Okay, so this is positive 63. I didn't mean to say 36. 63 is the right answer. All right. Over here, we know that a box of colored pencils may contain exactly 6 red pencils, and the probability of choosing a red pencil from the box is 2 over 7. Probability is just part over whole. So the part is what you want to happen. And the whole is everything that could happen. So the probability here is 2 out of 7, right? And you may be saying, well, the probability of choosing a red pencil is 2 over 7. So that means that you have 2 red pencils that you can choose out of a total of 7 pencils that can be any color, including red. But you may be saying, well, wait a minute, didn't you write the wrong probability? There are actually 6 red pencils, so how can the probability be 2 over 7? Good question. That's because this is actually a simplified fraction, right? Fractions can be simplified, right? 4 over 8 can be simplified into 1/2. They're the same thing. They're the same value, just written with bigger numbers or smaller numbers. So if I originally had 6 red pencils, that means that I have 6 in my numerator. Now, how do I turn 2 into 6? Well, I can just multiply it by 3. Whatever I do to the numerator, I do to the denominator. So this is actually equal to 6 over 21. So there's 21 pencils in total, right? And guess what? If I divide both by 3, I can simplify this into 2 over 7. So this is a simplified version of my original fraction right here. They have the same value when you calculate. They represent the same value. It's just the numbers were bigger on here. So that's how we find the number of total pencils. Now there's 21 pencils in total. We know that 6 are red. So if 6 of them are red, that means that 15 are not red. So the correct answer here has to be B. All right, moving on. We know that Kevin has 140 lorg and 16 dolts, and we know that if he exchanges the lorg and dolt for the dollar according to the rates, how many dollars will he receive? All right, so we know that $1 is equal to 7 lorgs. Okay, now he has 140 lorgs and X dollars, right? We want to find how many dollars are in 140 lorgs. So guess what? Cross multiply, right? If you always, if you have a conversion, or if you have a ratio, or you have a scale, just write it down like this and cross multiply. You can't get it wrong. $1, 7 lorgs. X dollars, 140 lorgs. Now you can think about it like this. You can either cross multiply. 1 and 140 is 140, and X times 7 is 7X. Or you can just think like, well, what did I have to multiply 7 by to get 140? That's 20. So now I have to do the same thing to get $1 into X. So I multiply by 20, and I get that X is equal to 20. Or if you cross multiplied, you could just divide both sides by 7. 140 divided by 7 is 20. So far, this guy has $20 just from the lorgs. Now we move on to the trickier part. It says that $1 is equal to 0.5 of a dolt. Okay? And we want to know how many dollars 16 dolts are. Okay? So what we can do here, again, is cross multiply, right? 16 times 1 is 16. And X times 0.5 is 0.5X. Now, if this confuses you, right, we can just divide both sides by 0.5. 16 divided by 0.5 is 32. So 32 is equal to X, which means he has also $32 from that. Now, if dividing by these decimals confuse you, you can always just convert it into a fraction, right? So we know that 0.5 is actually equal to 1/2. So $1 is actually just half a dolt. And if we have 16 dolts and X dollars, when we cross multiply, 1 times 16 is 16, and X times 1/2 is X over 2. So now I can cross multiply 16 by 2 to get 32, which is equal to X. Or I can just know that whenever I want to get rid of the denominator, when my numerator is a variable, I can just multiply the numerator on both sides by the denominator to get 32. Now he has 32 and $20 for a total of 52, which is choice B. All right. Over here, they want us to find the area of the shaded region. So If I look at this shaded region over here, I know it's a triangle, so I want to find the base and the height. I know that the base is going to be 1 because it's just 1 unit to get to 1. And I know that the height has to be also 1 because if I look at the y-axis, y is the height, x is the length. So the height to go from 0, or the height of this point is 1, right? So we go 1 here, and then we go 1 up, and we get to this point right here. So 1 times 1 times 1/2 is equal to, well, 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 1/2 is 1/2. So that's 0.5 square unit as our answer, okay? Remember, the area of a triangle is 1/2 AB. 1/2 times the, 1/2 BH. So B is the base and H is the height. We found both of them to be 1. All right. Consider this expression, create an equivalent expression. So remember, we're not trying to find the answer here. What we're just trying to do is to break this down by combining all the numbers inside of the absolute values. So notice here that we start off with the absolute value of -8 minus the -3, and we subtract that from the absolute value of 6 minus 11. Okay, our answer is still two values inside of the only one value inside of the absolute value sign subtracted. So we're not finding the actual value. All we're doing is we're just figuring out what goes on the inside of these symbols after we do the math. Now, an absolute value, the only thing that does, it turns a negative into a positive, and that's it. Technically, the math definition is it calculates the distance from 0. So if you have like -7 and you have 7, they're both 7 units away from 0. So the absolute value of -7 is 7 because it's 7 units away from 0, and the absolute value of +7 is still 7. Okay, doesn't really matter here. So inside of this sign over here, we have -8 minus -3. So -8 minus -3, just remove the parentheses in this case. They just want to do it so you don't get confused by the negative signs. Whenever you see two negative signs together, that means add. So -8 minus -3, these turn into a plus. The way I like to remember this is that it takes two lines to make a plus symbol. So this is -8 plus 3, which turns into -5. So I have the absolute value of -5 in one of them, okay? And I'm subtracting that from the absolute value of 6 minus 11, okay? And remember that 6 minus 11, oh, sorry, this is, I wrote this down incorrectly, guys, sorry about that. I was thinking to myself, well, this is impossible. The answer that I was going to get is impossible. And that's because this is -8 minus -3 plus 6. So -8 minus -3 plus 6. So -8 plus 3 plus 6. -8 plus 3 is -5. And -5 plus 6 is +1. So in this slot should go a +1. And in this slot, 6 minus 11 is going to equal to -5, right? So here goes -5, and when I go ahead and I'm just going to drag my answers here. So here I have 1. I'm going to put it in this slot, and over here I have -5. I'm going to put it in this slot. I'm going to call it a day and move on to the next problem. So literally this wasn't that hard. All you had to do is just know how to subtract by negative numbers. Next, we know that Miss Cranston bought 5 bottles of water for 90 cents each. Not 99, but just 90, and 8 pounds of meat, and we know she paid a total of $26.90 for these items without tax. We want to know the price per pound of the meat. So we know that she has 5 water bottles. 5 water bottles for 90 cents each. That means that in total she paid $4.50 for these water bottles, because 5 times 90, or 5 times 0.9, is 4.5. So she paid $4.50 for the water bottles, and now she just has 8 pounds of meat. All right? So in this case, we have $26.90 minus $4.50. So I'm going to subtract. This turns into 4. This turns into 2. So now she spent $22.40 only on the meat. Okay? This $4.50 was including the water bottles. So now if I have $22.40, I just need to divide that by 8 pounds to find the price per 1 pound, right? Because if 8 pounds of meat is equal to $22.40, 1 pound is equal to X. In order for me to go from 8 to 1, I just divide by 8. Or you can cross multiply, you get 8x is equal to $22.40 and divide both sides by 8 either way. So here 8 goes into 22. let's say 2 times, we get 16. What's left over? 6 is left over. We move this decimal point up here and we drop down the 4 to get 64. 8 goes into 64 8 times. And we're left with 2.8. In dollars, that's $2.80. We just add an extra 8 there. And that's going to get us choice A for the price of the meat. All right. In a sample of 10 cards, there's 4 red, 6 blue. And if 2 cards are selected at random, 1 at a time without replacement, which is the probability that they're not blue? So remember that probability is part over whole. The part is what you want to happen. So if I have 10 cards, that's my total, right? In total, I have 10 cards that I can choose from. Now, I want the cards to not be blue. So I want to choose cards that aren't blue. If 6 of them are blue, that means that 4 of them are not blue. That means that the rest are red. So I have 6 blue and 4 red, 10 in total. So out of the 10 cards that I can choose, the probability that I don't choose a blue card is 4, because that's the only other card. Now, once I make my selection, right? 4 out of 10. I need to make another selection, right? 2 cards are selected at random at a time. When you're selecting 2 cards or 2 of anything at a time, you're going to find 2 probabilities and multiply them together. The keyword here is without replacement. So if I go ahead and I select a red card, right? I now have 3 red cards in the bag and 6 blue cards in the bag. Why? Because I didn't replace it. Once I had selected the red, I didn't put it back in the bag. So now the number of reds has changed. It's actually decreased. So now the probability of getting another non-blue card, another card that isn't blue, aka another card that's red, is now 3 over 9. Okay? Now to make this multiplication easier, 3 over 9 is equal to just 1 over 3rd, 1/3 or 1/3. And this probability is equal to 4 over 30, which simplifies if I divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2 into 2 over 15, which is choice A. All right? Choice A, and I'm going to move on. All right. We know that a nation has 5 types of coins: Sind, Dalt, Lorg, Harp, and Plunk. Outrageous names. The relationship between the coins is shown above, and we want to know which coin is the most valuable coin. So how do you know if something is valuable? Well, we know something is valuable if it allows you to get more of something, right? So for example, let's think about like the US and Canada, right? Not to make this political, right? Let's say that the dollar, the US dollar, $1 US is equal to 5 Canadian dollars. Canadian dollars. Which one is more valuable? Obviously the US dollar. The US dollar is more valuable because it gets you more Canadian dollars. So it's $1 US is worth many Canadian dollars. That means that $1 US is worth more, right? Let's say that, like 1 gold bar or 1 pound of gold is like $1,000. What's more valuable, a dollar or a gold bar? Obviously a gold bar, because 1 gold bar gets you 1,000 of something, right? So that's obviously worth more money. Okay, the same thing goes for these like made up currencies, right? Now, let's start comparing them. The way that I like to compare them is I just want to see what gives you more, and I want to go from top to bottom. So the first one, I know that 1 Sind is equal to 4 Lorgs. Now, which one is more valuable, a Sind or a Lorg? Well, 1 Sind gives you 4 things. Okay, the Sind has to be more valuable. That means that I eliminate the Lorg from this competition. So this is round 1. I like to think about this in terms of rounds. So in round 1, the Sind won because the Sind gave you 4 things. It gave you multiple things. All right, round 2. We have the Plunk versus the Dalt. Okay, exciting. So 2 Plunks is equal to 5 Dalts. So if 2 Plunks is equal to 5 Dalts, that means that 1 Plunk is equal to 2.5 Dalts. So what is more expensive? What's worth more, a Plunk or a Dalt? Obviously a Plunk, because it's worth more than 1 Dalt. It gives you 2.5 Dalts. It's more valuable. Okay? Now, we know that 5 Sind is equal to 3 Harps. So if 5 Sind, round 3, by the way, if we have 5 Sind and it's equal to 2 Harps, that means that, well, 1 Harp is equal to 2.5 Sind. So what's more valuable, a Harp or a Sind? Well, 1 Harp is worth multiple Sinds. So technically the Harp is more valuable and the Sind is less valuable. No, our round 1 winner is eliminated. Sinds are not more valuable because 1 Harp is worth multiple Sind, okay? That still means that a Lorg is less than a Sind, right? It means a Lorg is like probably the least valued thing here. Regardless, a Harp gets you multiple Sinds. That means a Sind is no longer the most valuable currency, okay? And finally, we know that 1 Plunk is equal to 3 Harps. So here we have 2 competitors remaining. We have Plunks and Harps. One plunk gets you multiple harps, which means that the plunk has to be the most valuable thing, which is choice D. So again, I didn't do any math here other than division. All I did was I thought to myself, what gives me more? And that's what I found. 1 cent, 4 lorgs. Sind is more valuable. 1 plunk, 2.5 dolts. A plunk is more valuable. 1 harp, 2.5 sins. A harp is more valuable. And finally, 1 plunk is equal to 3 harps. A plunk is the most valuable thing because it eliminates the harp, which is the only other choice I had. All right. So the the faculty of a certain 4-year college consists of 179 teachers. By the way, faculty is like teachers. It just means the same thing. There's 663 first-year students, and the student to faculty ratio for the college is 15 to 1. Okay, so the student to faculty. Remember, 2 is the same thing as putting that colon here. So student to faculty is 15 to 1. What is the total number of second, third, and fourth year students? So first of all, I don't know the number of total students, right? I want to find the total number of second, third, and fourth year students. I only know the number of first year students. So obviously, the key here has to deal with the teachers. I know that the ratio of students to faculty is 15 to 1. Guess what? We're doing this again. This entire test, I feel like, is just proportions. So I have 179 teachers or 179 faculty. So I'm going to write that down here. But I want to find the total number of students, which is X. Guess what, guys? I've said it 1,000 times. I'm going to cross multiply. 15 times 179, all right, is equal to X times 1, which is X. So 179 times 15, that's 5, that's 4. That's going to be 9, that's going to be 3, that's going to be 8, 0, 9, 7, and 1, 5, 8, 1, 6, 1. So there's 2,685 students in total. Is this the answer? No, that's a trap answer because I want to know the total number of second, third, and fourth year students. This 2,685 is including the 663 first year students. I don't want them in my total, so I'm going to subtract it to get the rest of them because the total students are the first plus the second plus the third plus the fourth. So if I take away the first from the total, I'm left with the second, the third, and fourth, which is what I want. Okay, so this turns into 2, this turns into 2, this turns into 0, and I'm left with 2022, which is choice B. All right, right here. All right, next we have a not a Venn diagram. What am I talking about? We have a pie chart, right? A pie chart is going to give you a percentage of a value. We want to know how many more people in Center City walk to work than ride their bike to work. So we know that the total number of people working in the city is 1,500. It's important to read the graph or the diagram because it tells you the total. Now, how many people walk? Well, 22% of the population walks. Now, how do you find a percent of something? It's going to blow your mind. You just multiply it, right? So 22% of 15,000 is the same thing as saying 22% times 15,000. Remember that 22% is just 22 over 100 or 22 divided by 100, which is 0.22. You take 22 and you move the decimal once and twice to get 0.22. Now you just do 0.22 times 15,000, okay? Now, a quick trick for this. Instead of actually doing 15,000 times, 0.22, what you can do is you can just take out 2 zeros from the 15,000 and you can just multiply 150 by 22. Because either way, this answer, you're going to have to move the decimal point. Because this isn't hundreds, you're going to have to move the decimal point back 2 units. So a cool trick here is you could just move the decimal point of 15,000 back 2 units already, convert it into 150, and then multiply it by 22 normally. So 2 times 0 is 0, that's 0, that's 1, that's 3, that's 0, that's 0, that's 0, that's 0, that's 0, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. So 3,300 people end up walking to work. Now, we're comparing this to how many people bike to work. So people that bike to work, that's 4%. And remember, 4%, we're doing the same thing. We're finding 4% of 15,000. So 4% is 0.04. How do I do that? 4 divided by 1,000. And now I just do 0.04 times 15,000. And I do the same trick, right? I'm gonna have to move the decimal point here. Either way, 4 units of my answer, 4 units. 2 units to the left. So how about I just move this decimal point 2 units to the left to get 150 times 4. 0, 0, 2, 6. Now, 600 people bike to work. How many more people walk than bike? Well, when you want to find how many more, you just subtract. So 33,000 minus 600, 0, 0, 2, 13, 7. So it gives you 2,700 people as your answer, okay? Not hard, just a lot of addition. Not addition. That's the one thing we didn't do here. A lot of multiplication and subtraction, sorry. All right, which of the following numbers has a factor that includes the smallest factor other than 1 of 91, okay? So what's a factor? A factor is a number you multiply by another number to get a final number. So for example, the factor of like 6, or the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. 2 times 3 is 6, 1 times 6 is 6, okay? Those are the factors. So now we want to compare the factors of 91 to our answer choices here, right? And their factors. So let's find the factors of 91. Obviously, 91 is going to be, well, 91 times 1. So 91 and 1 are both factors. But let's look at other factors. Can 2 be a factor? No. Why? The only time 2 is a factor is if the last digit of the number is even. In this case, it's not even. If you divide 91 divided by 2, you'll get a remainder. The same thing goes with 3. How do I know this straight off the bat, though? If the trick to see if something is divisible by 3 or if it has a factor of 3 is if you multiply the digits. 91 is made up of 9 and 1. If you add these two digits together, you get 10. Is 10 divisible by 3? No. Does that mean that 91 is divisible by 3? Also no. Now let's take something like 63, for example. Is 63 divisible by 3? Yes. How do I know that? If I add the digits together, 6 plus 3 is 9, and 9 is divisible by 3. So that's how I know it's divisible by 3. All right. Now 4, I don't have a rule for 4. Sorry, guys. 91 divided by 4. 4 goes into 9 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. That's 1. Move down to 1. Does 4 go into 11 evenly? No. You're going to have a remainder. 4 goes into 11 2 times. 8. You have a remainder of 3. So 4 is not a factor. Now 5. 5 for sure isn't a factor because if 5 is a factor or if a number is divisible by 5, it has to end in 0 or 5. Okay? Now, let's test out 6 because I also don't have a rule for 6. If I divide by 6, I get 1. 6 goes into 9 1 time. That's 3, that's 1. 6 goes into 31 5 times, and I have a remainder of 1. So 6 is not a factor. Now let's test out 7. 7 divided by 91. 7 goes into 91 1 time. 9 minus 7 is 2, carry down the 1. 7 divided by 21 is 3. So the next factor, aside from 1, is 7, and then 13, and then 91. Those are the factors of 91, essentially. Now, which of the following numbers has factors that include the smallest factor other than 1? The smallest factor other than 1 is 7. So which one of these has a factor of 7? The only one here is 35. 7 times 5 is 35. 7 is a factor of 35. That's why B is the answer. All right. Next one. In a scale drawing of a triangular banner, one side measures 16 and the other two measure 12 inches. Okay, so let's look at this. We have... This is 16 inches, this is 12 inches, this is 12 inches. On the actual banners, these two sides measure 36 feet. Okay, so here I have 36 and 36 feet and 36 feet. And we want to know the length of the remaining side of the banner, okay? So in this case, I have another scale drawing, right? On paper, we have a banner that's 12 inches, and 16 inches. In real life, these 12 inches actually turn into 36 inches. So if 12 inches turns into 36 inches, I wonder what 1 inch turns into. Oh, sorry, if 12 inches turns into 36 feet, I wonder what 1 inch turns into x feet. Guess what? We have the same setup, and we're going to cross multiply. 12 times x is 12x is equal to 1 times 36, which is just 36. If I divide both sides by 12, I know that x is 3. So technically 1 inch on this diagram is equal to 3 feet in real life because I set up this proportion. This is a scale drawing, always think proportion. Now if 1 inch is equal to 3 feet, 16 inches is equal to, well, in order for me to get from 1 inch to 16 inches, I multiplied by 16. So I do the same thing to this side. 3 times 16 is 48. So this has to be 48 feet, which is choice D, right? Let's select choice D and move on. All right. Here it asks us what's the mean score of the 10 students in the class. So remember that mean is every single data point added up and divided by the total number of data points. So each score here is a data point. So I have a score of 85 that 4 people got. So I'm going to do 85 plus 85 plus 85 plus 85. And then I'm going to do 75, which is another score that 4 people got. So 75 plus 75 plus 75 plus 75. And then I'm going to add 65 plus 65. And then I'm going to divide it by the total number of students, or the total number of numbers that I'm adding here, which is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, plus 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2. All right, 4 plus 4 is 8, 8 plus 2 is 10. Now, are you actually going to have to add this? No, you can just multiply it, right? 8 plus 8 plus 8, sorry, 85 plus 85 plus 85 plus 85, same thing as saying 85 times 4, okay? So you don't actually have to add. All you have to do is multiply the score by the number of students that got that score, okay? It's the same thing, right? So here I have 85 times 4, which is 0, 2. That's 340. So all of these add up into 340. I'm going to add that to 75 times 4, which is 300. And I'm going to add that to 65 times 2, which is 130. Now I have to add these up. So 300 plus 340 is 640, and 640 plus 130 is 770. And I'm dividing this by 10. Divide this by 10, just get rid of the 0, and I get 77 over 1, which is 77. So the mean score here was 77, okay? Remember, mean, add up all the data points, or in this case, multiply the data points by however many times it's repeated, and then divide by the total number of points. All right. The least of 5 consecutive integers is L, and the greatest is G. What is the value of L plus G divided by 2 in terms of L? All right, so this question, again, deals with consecutive integers. We dealt with this problem in a previous question in this video, right? So consecutive means one after the other. So an unknown integer unknown integers that are consecutive follow this format: x plus 1. These two are consecutive, okay? For example, 1, 2, 3, and 4. How do I get to the next one? Well, I add 1, and I add another one, and I add another one. Okay, so here we have 5 consecutive integers. So I don't know the value, so I'm just going to put empty spaces. So that's my first one. Here's my second integer. Here's my third integer, my fourth integer, and here's my fifth integer. Okay, I know the least is L. So my first one has to be L, right? Because that's the smallest one. And the smallest one in the sequence is always the first one, right? 1 is the first one in the sequence, so it's always the smallest. If I have a sequence 5, 6, 7, and 8, guess what? 5 is the smallest because it's the first. And the greatest is G, so the greatest has to be the last one, right? Because that's when you stop adding numbers. So now, what is the value of L plus G over 2 in terms of L? So what are the numbers in between here? Well, let's think about it. In order to get to the next number after L, let's think of if I had 1. If my sequence started at 1, how do I get to 2? Well, I just add 1. That's the rule. Always add 1 to your variable. So the second number is actually equal to L plus 1. And this third number, well, how do you get to the third number from the second one? You add 1 to this one. So you add another 1. Now you have L plus 2. Now, how do you get to the fourth one from the third one? You add another 1. You get L plus 3. So now I know that the numbers in between are L plus 1, L plus 2, and L plus 3. And that should make sense, right? Because this is actually equal to L plus 1 plus 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. So you're just adding another plus 1 to the previous term. But in this case, you're just combining them together. Now, what if they didn't tell us that the greatest one was G? They just said that there was a fifth term. Technically, in order for me to find the fifth term, I would just have to add 1 to the previous term. So G is the same thing as saying L plus 4, right? Because it's the fifth term. It's still 1 away from L plus 3. So we know that G is equal to L plus 4. And if all of a sudden I wanted to find the value of L plus G over 2, I know that G is the same thing as saying L plus 4, so I'll just plug it in here. So I have L plus 4 divided by 2, which is 2L plus 4 divided by 2, which is just L plus 2. All right, and that's going to be my correct answer here. L plus 2, which is choice C. All right, moving on. It says that the owner of a tree farm plants pine trees and oak trees in a ratio of 8:3. Oh, more ratios, guys. So here we have pine trees to oak trees in a ratio of 8:3. How many oak trees are planted if 264 pine trees are planted? So if 264 pines exist, that means that X oak trees have to exist. You know what I'm going to say already? Cross multiply. 8 times X is 8X, and then 264 times 3 is just 264 times 3, whatever that is. Let's figure that out. So this is 2, this is 1, this is 9, this is 1. That's 792. So 8X is equal to 792. And then finally, divide both sides by 8. 792 divided by 8, that's going to be 9, 72, 0, 72, and 9 again. So there has to be 99 oak trees that have to be planted, okay? Again, if you just write your ratios like this with the units on top and then the numbers on bottom with the unknown value, you'll always get it right. The other way you can do this was you could have said pine over oak is equal to 8 over 3, and 8 over 3 is equal to 264 over x. But this is the exact same thing as what I put over here, just easier to understand, hopefully. All right, so moving on, this was equal to 99. All right, moving on. So it says that today Tien's age is 1/4 of Jordan's age. Okay, more translating math into English. Tien's age is, we know that is same thing as equals. So Tien, her age, is equal to 1/4 of Jordan's age. Remember, or I guess don't remember because I didn't tell you this yet, but of means multiply. So Tien is equal to, her age is equal to 1/4 times Jordan's age, okay? In 2 years. So 2 years later, is Tien's age going to be the same or is it going to increase? It's going to increase. By how much? Well, by 2 because it's 2 years later. So now I have Tien plus 2 is equal to, well, 1/3 times Jordan's age. Is it going to stay the same or is it also going to increase by 2? It's also going to increase by 2. Plus 2. Okay? So these are my two equations. Let me quickly simplify this. This is t is equal to j over 4. Remember that 1/4 times j is the same thing as saying 1 over 4 times j over 1. So 1 times j is j and 4 times 1 is 4. Okay? Now here I have t plus 2 is equal to j plus 2 over 3. All right, perfect. Now we want to find how old Jordan is. Well, again, if I have two equations and they have different variables in them, I can't solve them. Unless I plug in one of them. I already know that Tn is equal to j over 4. I have a t on its own, on her own right here. So I can just plug in j over 4 into t. So now I have j over 4 plus 2 is equal to j plus 2 over 3. And then I could just solve for j over here. Now, look over here. I have j over 4 plus 2. Can I add these? Technically I can because this is 2 over 1. Remember that in order for me to add fractions, I need them to have the same denominator. So how can I add 2 over 1 and j over 4? Well, 1 and 4, what's the lowest common denominator? 4. So how do I turn 1 into 4? I just multiply by 4 over 4. Cool trick, if your denominator is ever 1, the lowest common denominator is the other denominator, okay? So this 2 over 1 is equal to 8 over 4, and this is equal to j plus 2 over 3. Now, if I have j plus 8 and they're both over 4, I can actually just combine them under the same fraction. So this becomes j plus 8 over 4. So if you were screaming at me like, no, you can't combine a variable and a number, technically I didn't combine them. I just combined the two fractions together. Different thing. You can combine the fractions. You just can't combine j and 8 actually. So anyways, this is equal to j plus 2 over 3. And once again, we're going to have to cross multiply. So here we're doing 3 times j plus 8. And that's equal to 4 times j plus 2. Okay, so break them out of the parentheses. That's 3j plus 24 is equal to 4j plus 8. Subtract 3j from both sides, and I get 24 is equal to j plus 8. Subtract 8, and I know that 16 has to equal to j, which is choice D. Okay, so Jordan is 16 years old. Next. Here it's asking us to complete the steps to show one way to solve this equation, okay? So here I have 24 is equal to negative 0.5 times x plus 8. Now, this is their first step. They wrote it down just like I did. And now the second step, what they did was, well, let's look at it. Well, I don't see any parentheses anymore. This is literally just a game of what changed. So in this case, what changed was the parentheses are gone. And whenever I get rid of the parentheses, what I actually end up doing is I end up multiplying the number outside of the parentheses by whatever's on the inside. And we could see that happen here because negative 0.5 times x is negative 0.5x. Perfect. So now I do the same thing, right? To fill in this box, all I need to do is negative 0.5 times 8. And negative 0.5, same thing as saying negative 1/2, and negative 1/2 times 8 is negative 4. So what goes in here is actually negative 4, okay? Now, they have 24 is equal to negative 0.5x minus 4. They did exactly what I would do. I would distribute this to break it out of the parentheses. Now, all of a sudden, they got rid of this negative 4. How'd they do it? Well, no magic. They just combined like terms. So they added 4 on both sides. And now I have 28 is equal to negative 0.5x. So 28 goes in this box because they just added 4 on both sides. Finally, what I have to do is now I have to divide both sides by negative 0.5 and divide this by negative 0.5. Remember, guys, dividing by 0.5 is the same thing as multiplying by 2. And it doesn't look like that, but it technically is. So this, instead of putting negative 14, that's wrong. That's the trap answer here. What you should put is negative 56. And that would be the correct answer in this case, okay? Negative 56 is the correct answer because dividing by 0.5 is the same thing as multiplying by 2. If that confuses you, think about it in terms of a fraction. Here I have 28 over 1 divided by 1 over 2. Remember that when you divide fractions, keep, change, flip. So 28 over 1 times 2 over 1. 28 over 1 divided by 0.5. That's the same thing as saying 28 over 1 divided by 1/2. Remember, keep, change, flip when you divide by fractions. So here we have 28 over 1. We change this into multiplication, and then we flip this into 2 over 1 to get 56. Of course, it was negative here, so we have to assign this negative 56, and that's going to be our answer. Okay? So when I go and type in over here, this is negative 4. Oh, sorry, just drag it in. Negative 4. This is negative 56, and this is 28. Moving on. All right, what is the value of the expression shown above? So here I have 2 1/5 plus 3 3 over 10 plus 4 2/5 plus 5 1/2. So in order to add all these together, what I like to do is I like to set aside the whole numbers. So here I have 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm just going to set them aside. I'm adding them together. I'm adding all these mixed fractions together, so I'm going to add them either way. So here I have a whole section and I have a fraction section. Okay, I'm going to keep them separate. So here I have my whole numbers, 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. And over here I have my fractions, 1/5 plus 3/10 plus 2/5 plus 1/2. In order to add these, they all have to have the same denominator. In this case, the lowest common multiple of 5, 10, and 2 is 10, right? 10, 10, and 10. These all go into 10. That's the first number that they all have in common. Okay, that's what the lowest common multiple is. The first number that each one of these multiplies into or has in common. So here, in order to turn 1/5 into something that has a denominator of 10, multiply by 2 over 2 to get 2 over 10. Here we don't multiply by anything because it's already over 10. Here we do the same thing, multiply by 2 over 2 to get 4 over 10. And here multiply by 5 over 5 to get 5 over 10. So now we add all these together. 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 plus 5 is 10, and 10 plus 4 is 14. So I'm left with 14 over 10. And over here, 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 plus 5 is 10, and here's 14, because 14 plus 10 is 14. Now I can combine both of these together to get 14 and 14 over 10. But that's not an answer. And technically, that's because this is an improper fraction, right? 14 over 10, I can actually convert this into 1 and 4 over 10, because 14 over 10 is the same thing as saying 10 over 10 plus 4 over 10. 10 over 10 is 1, right? So because the numerator is bigger than the denominator, I need to turn this into a mixed fraction. So this is the same thing as saying 1 and 4/10. So this 1 just gets thrown in with the whole numbers, and now your fraction is 15 and 4/10. And if we simplify this, that turns into 15 and 2/5, right? Which is choice B. Sorry, choice D, 15 and 2/5. Okay. Over here, we say that an unmarked stick will be laid over end to end to measure a distance of exactly 72 feet, and the same stick will be used the same way to measure a distance of exactly 30 feet. What is the length of the longest possible stick that could be used for both measurements? So essentially, we're looking at the stick, and we're laying it end to end the same distance the whole time until we cover a total distance of like 72 and then a total distance of 30, right? So essentially, the length of my stick has to be able to evenly fit into both of these numbers, or else we wouldn't be able to measure that distance. We'd have to break the stick in half. So if our stick is 3 feet long, right, can a 3-foot stick be placed end to end in order to add up to 72? The way that you check this is you check if each one of these choices is divisible. If a 72 and 30 are both divisible by the choice. So is 72 divisible by 3? No. Why? If we add the digits, 7 plus 2 is... Oh, sorry. Oh, made a mistake. Sorry, guys. We ask ourselves... we already asked ourselves that. 7 plus 2 is 9. And is 9 divisible by 3? Yes, so 72 is divisible by 3. Now, is 30 divisible by 3? Yes. So a 3-foot stick could work, but we want to find the longest possible stick, and other answer choices are longer. So now, can the stick be 4 feet? And the answer is no, because 30 is not divisible by 4. So in this case, we'd have an answer of 7 with a remainder of 2. So our stick would be able to fit end to end 7 times, but then we'd have to break it like in half to get the extra length to cover 30 feet. All right, so this is false. 6 feet, well, 72 divided by 6 is 12. So we'd have to just go end to end 12 times, and then 30 divided by 6 is 5. So technically 6 also works. Now what about 8? 8 doesn't work because 30 is not divisible by 8. So this would not evenly fit into that distance. So how do I choose between 3 and 6? They both work. Well, we want the longest possible stick, and 6 is longer than 3. All right, we know that there's 6 different cookies on a plate, and Aiden's going to choose 2 of these cookies to pack in his lunch. How many different pairs of cookies, emphasis on the word pair, of 2 cookies can he choose from the 6? So in this case, whenever you want combinations, first of all, how many choices are you making? In this case, he has 6 cookies, but he's only bringing 2. So he has to make 2 choices. So my method, number 1, figure out how many choices. Once you figure out the number of choices, number 2, write down the number of lines that represent the choices. So here I wrote 2 lines because there's 2 choices. Number 3, write a multiplication sign between the 2 choices. All right. Number 4, figure out how many choices go in each selection. So when he's looking at this plate, there's 6 cookies. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Let's say there's A, B, C, D, E, and F. So he's looking and he can choose between A, B, C, D, or F. So there's 6 choices on his first round. Now the second round, she's already chosen 1 of the 6. And there's only 1 of each cookie. So now there's only 5 cookies he has to choose from. And that means that there's a total of 30 different combinations. But the question is asking us for how many different pairs of combinations. We know that a pair is 2. So if there's 30 possibilities, that means that there's actually 15 pairs of possibilities, which is choice B. So this was a dangerous question because a lot of kids would just choose 30 and not realize that they're asking us for pairs. And the reason why that matters is, let's say that I have cookies A through F, right? That means that he can get cookie AB, AC, AD, AE, and AF. He can choose BA, BC, BD, BE, and BF. He can choose CA, and D, DB, DC, DE, and DF. And finally, EA, EB, EC, ED, EF, and finally FA, FB, FC, FD, and FE. So these are all 30 choices that he can get. These are all 30 choices. But if I look at these choices, right, aren't A, B, and BA the same thing? Yes, they are, right? If A is a red velvet cookie and B is a vanilla cookie or like a sugar cookie, if he chooses a red velvet and a sugar cookie in his lunchbox versus a sugar cookie and a red velvet cookie, he still has the same cookie. So technically A, B, and BA are the same choice. So counting them together is counting the same combination twice, which is why we had to divide this by 2. So we can just eliminate it there. Then we see the same issue here. Remember that CA and AC are the same thing. We know that CB and BC are the same thing. So we can eliminate them because it's just the same combination of cookies, just flipped. When you put them in the lunchbox, the same 2 cookies are in the lunchbox. All right, DA is the same thing as AD. DB is the same thing as BD. DC is the same thing as CD, right? Then EA is the same thing as AE. EB is the same thing as BE. EC is the same thing as CE. ED is the same thing as DE. And EF is the only unique combination. And finally, you see that all of the combinations with F have already been made in this row. And that leaves us with only 15 choices, or 15 pairs of choices, okay? So don't fall for the trick. Moving on, it says that for a presentation, Dion can create 5 slides in 20 minutes. And we know that Kira can create 3 slides in 10 minutes. So if they work at their own constant rate, what's the total number of slides they can create in 1 hour? So we know that 1 hour is 60 minutes. So if he creates 5 slides in 20 minutes and X slides in 60 minutes, right? this rate stays the same. So how do I turn 20 into 60? Well, I just multiply by 3, which means that x has to equal to 15. You just multiply by 3. So he makes 15 slides in an hour. She makes 3 slides in 10 minutes. So in 60 minutes, how do I get from 10 to 60? Well, I multiplied by 6. That means that she can make 18 slides. So 15 slides plus 18 slides, that's 15 plus 18. That's how much they're going to make in total, right? So that's going to be 1. That's going to be 33 slides in total, which is the correct answer here. Over here it says on the number line ln, on the number line above, ln is equal to 1/8 and is located between point L and N, which is a possible value for m. Okay, so here is our number line. Here is n. And here is 4 and 5 over 16. My advice here, because our answers are in decimals and our options here are in fractions, is to convert everything here into a decimal, right? 4 and 5/16 is equal to 4 point something, right? This is a whole number, this is a fraction. How do I figure that out? Well, I just divide 16 by 5 in order to convert this into a decimal. So 16 goes into 5 0 times, so I put a 0 here, and I put a 0 here, and I put a decimal here. 16 goes into 50, I want to say 3 times, because 16 times 3, oh, actually maybe 4 times. 16 times 4 is 4, 2, nope, it goes into 3 times. That's 8, that's 1, that's 48, okay? 48, subtract. This is 2, carry down the 0. 16 goes into 20 one time. So now subtract, give myself more space for the division here. I'm left with a 4. And I'm going to carry down the 0. 16 goes into 40. How many times? 2 times to get 32. Minus that, 8, carry down to 0. How many times does 16 go into 80? 5 times. That's 0. So the division here wasn't hard. And I'm left with 4.3125. That's what 4 and 5/16 is equal to. So technically, we can say that L is actually at 4.3125. And we know that ln is equal to 1/8. So the distance between L and N is 1 over 8. Remember that 1/8 is equal to 0.125. This is a value, or this is a fraction value that you should absolutely memorize, right? The same way that you memorize 1/4 as 0.25, right? So if the distance between L and N is 0.125, that means that N is just plus 0.125 away from 4.3125. So if I add 1, 2, 5 right here, I get that point N has to be located at 4.4375. Make sure to line up the leading 0. Line up this 0 right here, the 0 point, with the whole number, right? This is the ones, this is the tens, hundreds, thousands position, right? So match up the ones together, okay? And you get this. Don't make a mistake with your addition. So L exists at 4.3125, N exists at 4.4375. What number falls between here? It's not 4.26, that's all the way to the left. That's too small to fit in this range. Somewhere over here. 4.31, oof, 4.31 is a trick answer, right? It's just over here. It's too small, right? It's missing that extra 0.25 to bring it to L. That leaves us with choice C, the correct answer, because 4.35 is greater than 4.3125, right? 3.5 is greater than 3.1, but it's less than 4.3. So it's less than this, it's greater than this, so it fits perfectly in between. 5.48 is too great, right? Or it's too big. So correct answer has to be C. All right, here it's asking us for what is the value of x in this equation. This is as if you had a gradient question. So if I had 6x is equal to 9x plus 13, subtract 9x from both sides, I get negative 3x is equal to 13. Divide both sides by negative 3, and I get that x is equal to negative 13 over 3, and I cannot simplify this. What I can do is I can turn this into a mixed number, right? 13 over 3, this numerator is bigger than the denominator. So this is actually negative 4 and 1/3, right? This is negative 4 and 1/3. Why? Because 3 can go into 13 4 whole times to get 12, and then there's a remainder of 1, so we put 1 over 3 right here. And of course, we divided a negative by a positive, so this is negative 4 and 1/3. So we can go ahead and, in our answer selector, press this to get a mixed number. In this section, we can put minus 4, click on the numerator, and then type in 1, click denominator, type in 3, and that's going to be our answer here, okay? Obviously, you cannot convert this into a decimal. You have a repeating decimal, so you have to keep it as a fraction. You cannot use an improper fraction. That's technically wrong. They want a mixed number here, all right? Moving on to the next section. We know that Ryan must read 150 pages for his school this weekend, and it took him 30 minutes to read the first 20 pages. Okay, so again, we're following the same format. At this rate, how much additional time will he need to finish reading? So it took him 30 minutes to read the first 20 pages, and he needs to read a 150-page book. Now, he already read the 20 pages, so technically he only has 120 pages left to read, right? So if he reads 20 pages every 30 minutes, he has 130 pages left over. Why? Because 150 minus 20 is equal to 130. So now he has 130 pages left to go in X amounts of minutes, right? So guess what I'm going to have to tell you guys to do here? Cross multiply, right? So we can do 30 times 130 is equal to 20 times X. So this is going to equal to 3900 is equal to 20x, right? I can divide both sides by 20. I can do my trick where I can minimize the zeros by xing it out right here. I have 390 divided by 2 to get 1, 19, 9, 18, 1, 0, and 5. So it's going to take them 195 minutes to get those 130 remaining pages in. Okay? Now, I hope you understand how I did that. All I did was I set up my ratio, 30 minutes to 20 pages, x minutes to 130 pages, and well, I just cross multiplied from there. So I know it's going to take him 195 minutes to read the rest of the pages, the other 130 pages, right? But I need to convert this into a mixed number, right? How many hours is this? I need this in terms of hours. So how many full hours can go into 195 minutes? Well, I know that 1 hour is 60 minutes. I know that 2 hours is 120 minutes. 3 hours is 180 minutes. And finally, 4 hours is 240 minutes. How do I know this? I'm just multiplying 60 minutes by 1 hour, 60 minutes by 2, so on and so forth. So this 195 falls between 3 and 4 hours, right? So that means that 195 is 3 hours, because that's 180 minutes, and 15 minutes left. In other words, that's 3 hours and 15 over 60, right? Why is it 15 over 60? Because there's 15 minutes out of 60 hours. That's 3 and 15 over 60 hours. You convert the rest of the minutes into a fraction of an hour because it's a total of 60 minutes in 1 hour. And this 15 over 60 converts into 1 over 4. If you divide both the top and the bottom by 15. So this is 3 1/4 hour, which is choice B. All right, moving on. So here we have, suppose m is equal to w over x, n is equal to y over z, and w, x, and y and z do not equal 0. What is m divided by n in terms of w, x, y, and z? So you should know that m over n is the same thing as saying m divided by n. Same thing. So if m is equal to w over x and n is equal to y over z, we can just plug it in here, right? We know that m is the same thing as saying w over x, n is the same thing as saying y over z. So if m divided by n, m over n is equal to m divided by n with this division symbol right here, we can just plug in this value for m to get that and this value for n to get that. Remember, when you divide fractions, keep, change, flip. You keep this left fraction as it is. You change the division symbol into a multiplication symbol, that's the c, and then you flip this other fraction. The numerator becomes the denominator becomes the numerator. So here this is times z over y, and the answer here is wz over xy, because w times z is wz, x times y is xy. So this turns out to be choice C here. All right, wz over xy. Another way you could have done this, albeit a more complicated way, was you could have done a complicated fraction, right? If you had m over here, you could have done w over x as m, and n you could have plugged in y over z, and then you know that this is the same, this division symbol right here is the same thing as w over x divided by y over z, so you just write this as w over x times z over y to get wz over xy. Same thing I did, it's just you start off by plugging it in rather than start off by writing it as m divided by n and then plugging in. All right, moving on. Two different ways to do it, by the way. So here, in the set of consecutive integers from 12 to 30 inclusive, there are 4 integers that are multiples of both 2 and 3. How many integers are multiples of neither 2 nor 3? So a consecutive integer, again, third time we see this word, it's one after another. And it's integers from 12 all the way up to 30. And inclusive means it includes this set of integers, this set of numbers includes the start and the end point. So let's draw out these numbers, right? From 12 to 30, that's 12. Because it's inclusive, it includes 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. And finally 30 because it's inclusive again. Now, how many are multiples of both 2 and 3? Well, if you're a multiple of 2 and 3, that means that you're divisible by 2 and 3. They want us to know how many of numbers here are multiples of neither 2 nor 3. So let's ask ourselves, is 12 divisible by 2? Yes. Divisible by 3? Yes. 13, is it divisible by 2? No. 3? No. It's a prime number. Can't be divisible by both. All right. 14, it's divisible by 2. So it fails this, right? It's divisible by 2. That means it's even if it's not divisible by 3, it's still divisible by 2. So it's not neither 2 nor 3. All right, 15, divisible by 3, out. 16 is divisible by 2, that's out. 17 is a prime number, only divisible by itself and 1. 18 is divisible by 2 and 3. 19 is divisible by nothing. 20 is divisible by 2 and 2 only. 21 is divisible by 3. 22 is divisible by 2. 23 is unique. It's a prime number. All right, 24 is divisible by 3. 25 is not divisible by 2 or 3, so it's not a multiple. 26 is divisible by 2. 27 is divisible by 3. 28 is divisible by 2. 29 is a prime number, it's alone. And 30 is divisible by 3. So how do you check if something is a multiple? You see if it's divisible by that number. So here, essentially, if they're asking us which integers aren't multiples of 2 or 3, it's asking us which numbers can you not evenly divide 2 or 3 into. So if you can divide 2 into one of these numbers, guess what? It's not the correct answer. If you can divide 3 but not 2, again, still not the right answer because you want numbers that are not divisible by 2 or 3, one of the other. All right? So 13, 17, 19, 23, 25, and 29 are the only numbers in the sequence that aren't divisible by 2 or 3, meaning they aren't multiples of 2 or 3. In total, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 numbers. So this has to be choice B. 3n is a positive even number. How many odd numbers are in the range of 3n up to and including 3n plus 5? All right, so if 3n is an even and positive number, how many odd numbers are in the range from 3n to 3n plus 5? So let's look at numbers, right? Let's start with 1. 1 is odd, then 2 is next, 3 is odd, 4 is even, 5 is odd, 6 is even, 7 is odd, 8 is even, 9 is odd, 10 is even. So the pattern here is that it starts at odd, then even, then odd, and so on and so forth. It flips. So if I know that 3n is an even number, how do I show the next number in the sequence? Well, I add 1 to it. Let's say that 3n is equal to 1. How do I get to the next number? I just add 1. Again, this is the same thing as those consecutive integers, right? It's equal to the last integer, or the variable, plus 1. So if my variable is 3n, that means that my next number is 3n plus 1. Then my next number is 3n plus 1, or 3n plus 2, right? So 3n plus 2. My next number is 3n plus 3, and then my next number is 3n plus 4, and my next number is 3n plus 5. And that's where I'm supposed to stop, because we're supposed to go up to and include 3n plus 5. So let's look at the numbers now. This one was even, which means the next one has to be odd. The next one has to be even. The next one has to be odd. The next one has to be even. And the next one has to be odd. Finally, they're asking us how many odd numbers are between. So we start with an even number. We have 1 odd, 2 odd numbers, and 3 odd numbers between. Okay, so the correct answer has to be B. So up to and including 3n plus 5 would be 3 odd numbers. All right, when a student buys 4 notebooks, the cost is 12. The total cost is $12. Select each point on the graph that best represents y, the cost of X notebooks, okay? So 4 notebooks is $12. 1 notebook is X dollars, right? So 4 notebooks is $12. 1 notebook has to be how many dollars? Well, cross multiply, right? 4 times X is 4X, and that's equal to 12. Divide both sides by 4, and that's X is equal to 3. Or, what did I do to go from 4 to 1? I divided by 3, so I have to do the same to this side. 12 divided by 3 how do I go from 4 to 1? I divided by 4. So I do the same thing. Over here, I divide by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So X, I have no clue what that sound was outside. Oh my goodness. It is 12:21 as I'm recording this. Sorry, guys. Anyways, so X has to equal to 3, right? That means that 1 notebook has to equal to $3. So if I look at this graph, right, I'm supposed to click on the points that are correct. So this point right here, it says that when I have 1 notebook, the total cost is $1. Is that true? No. When I have 1 notebook, the total cost should be $3. So I'm not going to click that. Now there's another point. It says when you have 1 notebook, the total cost is $3. Is that true? Yes, it's true. Absolutely. Because 1 notebook is $3. Let's look at this point right here. It says when you have 2 notebooks, the total cost is $5. Is that true? No. If I have 2 notebooks, that means I have to have $6 worth of notebooks, right? Because 3 times 2 is 6. If I have 3 notebooks, that should cost $9 because 3 times 3 is 9. So that means that this point has to also be correct. We want to select all correct answers. So this point is also correct. Then if I have 4 notebooks, I should have $12. So that point is correct. And if I have 5 notebooks, I should have $15 worth of cost, not 14. So those are the only 3 points that are correct. This point right here, this point right here, and this point right here. Those are the only 3 that are correct because it follows this 1 notebook to $3 ratio, okay? If I were to look at the other points, they don't follow that. So again, 3 books for $9, 4 books, $12, 1 book, $3. Everything else is wrong. It doesn't follow this 1 to 3 ratio. Moving on. All right. In the equation above, w, x, and y, and z are positive numbers. Which of these is equal to z? All right, so we have w over x is equal to y over z. And I want to solve for z. Okay, guys. Let's see if you can tell me what to do. If I have 2 fractions and they're equal to each other, I can cross multiply. You're probably tired of me saying it. So multiply the top and the bottom. You get wz is equal to the top and the bottom here, x times y, which is xy. Now, if I want to get z, if I want to find what z is equal to, I'm going to get z on its own. So I'm going to divide both sides by w, and I get that z is equal to xy over w, and xy over w is choice D, okay? So whenever you have 2 fractions equal to each other, always cross multiply to solve them, okay? Moving on, we're on question 101, guys. So on the number line above, points w, x, y, and z are integers. We know that wx to xy to xz is 4 to 2 to 3. And what is the value of w to y? Okay, so this ratio, right? Let's say we have this number line, right? Here we have w, here we have x, here we have 0, here we have y, and here we have z. This is 8, and this is negative 10. Now, the distance from w to z is what? Well, I have to go 10 units to get to 0, because negative 10 plus 10 is equal to 0. And then I have to go 8 units to get from 0 to 8. So I went 10 units to get to 0, and then 8 units to get to 8. So that's 18 units in total. So we know that WZ is equal to 18 units in length, right? Now, I know that the ratio of WX, which is this segment, to the ratio of x to y, which is this segment, to the ratio of y to z, which is this segment, is what? It's 4 to 2 to 3, right? So this is 4 to 2 to 3. Now, is the distance from w to x actually 4? Is the distance from x to y 2 and the distance from y to z 3? No, because 4 plus 2 plus 3 is actually equal to, well, let's look at it. That's 6 plus 3, which is 9. So 9 is not equal to the actual total distance of 18. But this does tell us important information. This is a simplified relationship, right? Remember that ratios can be simplified. A ratio of 6 to 3 can be simplified into a ratio of, you tell me, 2 to 1. Why? Because we can express this as a fraction of 6 over 3, which is the same thing as saying 2 over 1. The same thing goes for ratios that are multiple numbers long, right? A ratio, a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio, right? A ratio with 3 different slots can also be simplified. In this case, if I add all these numbers up, it equals to 9. But my actual total length is equal to 18, which means that the actual ratio of the distances here have to be 2 times what they're listed as in the problem. Because if I multiply each one of these values by 2, technically, I get 8 to 4 to 6. And if the ratio is actually 8 to 4 to 6, then 8 plus 4 plus 6 is equal to 18. Okay, so that means that the distance between W and X is 8. The distance between the distance between W and X has to be 8. Between X and Y has to be 4. And between Y and Z has to be 6. This has to be true, right? Because what they did was they simplified this original ratio with all the correct lengths down to 4 to 2 to 3 to make it in simplest terms and probably to confuse you. So when you have a problem like this, the solution is simple. Take the ratio, add it up, and then compare it to the total length. So the total length was 18, the ratio was 8. So, sorry, the ratio was 9. So how do you turn 9 into 18? You multiply it by 2, and you do the exact same thing for each number inside of this ratio in order to get the actual rates, or the actual distances. So now they want to know what's the length of WY. So the length of WY starts from W, goes all the way up to Y. Well, that's WX, which is 8 units long, okay? And then that's XY, which is 4 units long, so 8 plus 4 is 12. So that distance has to be choice C, or 12, all right? Over here it says a metal square used in an electronic device must have a thickness of 0.02 inch with an allowable error of 1%. What is the greatest allowable thickness of the metal square? So in this case, the device has to have a thickness of 0.02, but you're allowed to have a distance that's either plus 1% over or minus 1% under, okay? Let's think about it, right? We're looking at 0.02 and we need to find 1% of 0.02. We need to find our tolerance. Our tolerance is 1% of this. What did I say of meant? Of meant multiply. So if I have 1% of 0.02, that means I'm multiplying 1%, which is 0.01, by 0.02. And this should give you, well, 0.0002. Here you have 1, 2 unit places, so you're just moving 0.02, 1, and then 2 unit places out. So you've introduced an extra 0 here to get 0.0002. So this is your allowance. That means that you're allowed to be 0.0002 thick or 0.0002 too thin from your baseline of 0.02. So if you're too thick, that means you're adding this to 0.02. If you're too thin, that means that you're subtracting this from 0.02. All right. In this case, we want the greatest allowable thickness. So we're going to take our allowance, and to make this allowable, technically, we have to add this to our initial width to get 0.0202, which is choice C. I know I said 2 a lot, but all you have to do to find allowance is, or the maximum allowance, the maximum thickness, is to find the allowance and then add it to the starting value. You want to find the minimum thickness, you find the allowance by finding the percent of whatever, and then subtracting it from the initial, which is exactly what we didn't do. We did the opposite, we added it. All right. Moving on, we say that Mr. Blake's biology course is divided into 3 sections, and the same test was given to each section. The table shows both the lowest score and the range of scores on this test for each section, and we want to find the overall range of all scores in all 3 sections, right? So how do we do this? Well, we understand that range is equal to the maximum value minus the minimum value, okay? So let's look at each section. In section 1, the lowest score was 65. So let's look at section. So in section 1, the lowest was 65 and the range was 28. Remember that the range is equal to the highest score minus the lowest score. So in this case, the lowest score had to have been 65. The highest score we don't know. And finally, the range was 28. So 65 minus, or 28 is equal to x minus 65. If I add 65 to both sides, 65 plus 28, that's 3, that's 1. That means that the highest that someone scored here was a 93. Because 93 minus 65 is 28, right? Now let's look at section 2. The lowest score here was 62, and the range was 25. That means that x minus 62 is equal to 25. So if I add 62 and 25 together, I should get my highest score, okay? And if I add them together, I get 87. So in this section, the person that did the worst got a 62, and the person that did the best got an 87. Finally, in section 3, the lowest someone got was a 67, and the highest someone got was this number plus 22 to get 98 or 89. So now we want to find the overall range of scores. So his students are separated into 3 sections. But if they weren't separated into 3 sections, if this was one giant class, what would the overall range be? Well, that means that I would have to look at the 3 students that did the worst, and I have to see which one did the actually did the worst. And that's the student that got the 62, right? That's the lowest score here. Remember that range is the highest score minus the lowest score. So if this was one giant class, looking at all of the students regardless of their section, the lowest that someone ever got was a 62. Now the highest that someone ever got was a 93. So the overall range by combining all 3 of these section scores is a 93 minus a 62. And that's going to be a 31. So the overall range here for his entire class is 31, which is choice D. All right. In this graph above, it shows the number of schools per city for 5 small cities. We know that M and N have 500 schools have 500 students per school. Okay, so M and N both have 500. City P has 400 per school, and Q and R have 700 per school. Which of these 5 cities has the greatest number of students, okay? So over here, City M has 8 schools. Because City M has 8 schools, each one of those schools has 500 students. 8 times 5 is 4,000. So City M has 4,000 students because they have 5 schools each. They have 8 schools each with 500 kids. In other words, each one of these schools has 500, so you're adding 500 8 times, which is just 500 times 8. All right, City N. City N has 5 schools, and each one of them have 500 students, so that's a total of 2,500 students, okay? Now let's look at City P. City P has all the way up here 9 schools, but it has 400 students per each school. So that's going to give us 3,600 students. City Q has 700 students per school and has 6 schools. So 700 times 6 is 4,200. And finally, City R has 4 schools, each with 700 students, to give us 2,800. So who has the greatest number of students? Well, that has to be City Q, because 700 times 6 is equal to the biggest number out of the 5 schools here. So it has to be choice C, City Q. All right. Over here it says, in the infinitely repeating decimal above, 7 is the first digit in the repeating pattern. What is the 391st digit? So the problem like this will have to deal with remainders. In other words, we know that when you divide 10 by 13, you get a repeating decimal. So this decimal goes 0.769230, and then it starts over. 769230, 769230, 769230, okay? If I look, and it goes on forever, essentially. If I look at the pattern is 7699230. This is the unit that will keep repeating forever. This unit is technically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's 6 numbers long, okay? So if I go ahead and I extend this for 391 digits, I want to find how many full patterns I can fit into 391 digits. And let's look at that, right? I have 391 total digits, and I know that I can that my complete pattern comes in sets of 6, right? So how many times, or how many units of these 6 numbers can I fit into this 391 long unit, essentially? So 6 divided by 391, right? How many times does 6 go into 39? 6 times. That's 36. That's 0. That's 3. That's 1. How many times does 6 go into 31? That's 5 times. And now I have a remainder of 1. Okay, so what this means is this unit, 769230, if I were to write this out, 391 and 91 times, it would repeat 65 times. So if I took a break and all of a sudden I wrote 7, 6, 9, 2, 3, 0, this 0 would technically be the 390th digit. Okay, there's a break here, right? Because obviously I can't write it all on the page. This 6-digit pattern happens 65 times. So here it happens 65 times. And now we're on the 390th digit. Now, why did I write the 390th digit? Because technically this 6-digit pattern doesn't fit into 391. It doesn't fit perfectly. So you have one number left over. So instead of repeating another time, it's only going to go and run over by one number. So at the end of a sequence, the sequence has to start, and the sequence starts with a 7. So the 391st number has to be a 7, which is choice D. So these steps here, number 1, is to count the repeat. Count the total numbers inside of the repeating pattern. And number 2, divide the numbers, that says dive, divide the number of digits, right? The number, essentially the how long this repeat is by the total number of digits, and then just start looking at the remainder. If the remainder is 1, that means that the last digit has to be in the first position. So the remainder is the position of the number inside of this repeat. If the remainder was 2, the answer would be 6. If the remainder was 3, it would be 9, so on and so forth. So all you're doing here is finding a remainder and then looking at whatever digit it falls under, okay? That's all you have to do here for this number. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's just division and looking at remainders, okay? Over here, it asks us to graph the solution set for the inequality, -3. Get my marker out. So -3 is less than or equal to 2x minus 5. So remember, whenever I'm writing out an inequality on a number line, 2 rules, right? Greater than or equal to sign, less than or equal to sign means you're dealing with a closed circle. Less than, greater than means you're dealing with an open circle. In this case, I'm dealing with a greater than, so I'm dealing with a less than or greater than sign. So I know that when I go ahead and I draw my, or I select which one of these I'm going to put on my number line, I'm going to put one that has a closed circle. Now remember my second rule, I said this before in the video, I need to deal only in terms of x. So I need to get x on its own. So here I have 5 being taken away from x, so I can just add it to both sides. And yes, you can technically treat this symbol as an equal sign. It's the same thing, right? So we can add 5 on both sides. Now we have 2 is less than or equal to 2x, right? And now I can divide both sides by 2 to get x on its own, and I get 1 is less than or equal to x. That means that x can equal to 1 or x has to be greater than 1. So we have to make our arrow go away from 1. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose this symbol. And now we're going to place our starting point. Is x equal to 0? No. At its smallest value, x can only equal to 1. And then it has to be everything that's to the right of 1 because it has to be bigger than 1. And that's going to be the correct answer here. All right, so this question says, what is 100 times 2 plus 0.1 in parentheses squared minus 100? To solve this, remember PEMDAS, the order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. When you do this problem, do not multiply everything on the inside by 100. That is how you get this wrong. You only multiply the inside by 100 when there are variables inside of it. When you're dealing just with numbers, always follow the order of operations, right? Go from left to right, do the parentheses first, then the exponents, then the multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction, okay? In this case, we have parentheses. So we do the parentheses first. In the parentheses, we have 2 plus 0.1. So 2 plus 0.1 is, well, tell me, it's 2.1, okay? So we did whatever was in the parentheses, good for us. Now we have to do whatever's in the exponents. So the exponent tells us to take 2.1 and square it. So let's find 2.1 squared. That's 1, that's 2, that's 0, that's 2, that's 4. This is 1, 4, 4. And remember, we did 2.1. So we have to move our answer to the left by 1 and 2 decimal points to get 4.41. Okay? So now we have 100 times 4.41 minus 100. And remember, we just did exponents, so now we can do multiplication finally. So now we multiply this by 100, and we move the decimal point 2 units back to get 441 minus 100 to get 341 as our correct answer, which is going to be choice D. All right, it says that a sports store has containers of handballs, 5 blue, 5 red, 8 yellow, 9 white, 11 green. And if one ball is picked from a container at random, what's the probability that it will be yellow? So remember that probability is part over whole. The part is what you want. And the whole is the total or everything that can happen. So in this case, what I want is a yellow ball, right? What's the probability that I get a yellow ball? Well, I have to choose a yellow ball, and there's 9. No, there's not 9 of them. There's 5 reds. There's 8 yellow balls that I can choose from. So my part is what I want. So I want to choose one of those 8 balls. But in total, everything that could happen, I could select one of the 4 blue balls. I can select one of the 5 red balls, or the 8 yellow balls, or the 9 white balls, or the 11 green balls. So I have to find the total. So 9 plus 11 is 20. 20 plus 8 is 28. 28 plus 5 is 33. And is it 33? Tell me, guys. Yeah, it is. Okay. And 4 plus 33 is 37. So this turns into 8 over 37, which is choice C in this case. That's the probability that it will be yellow. All right, moving on. So this problem says that each week, Leon has a fixed expense of $1,250 at his furniture shop. And it cost him $150 to make a chair in his shop, and he sells the chair for $275. What is Leon's profit if he makes and sells 25 chairs in 1 week? So the profit is calculated by taking revenue minus expenses. So the revenue is the total money you make, and the expenses is total money spent. So in this case, we know that when Leon makes a chair, what's his revenue? First of all, the only way that Leon can make money is by selling chairs. Okay, that's his only source of revenue. Everything else is an expense. When Leon makes a chair, what happens? When Leon makes a chair, right, he gets revenue. He gets a revenue of $275. That's how much money he makes off a sale. But in order to make that chair, he has to spend $150, right? For like the wood or the upholstery or like the parts for the chair. So in reality, every single time he actually makes a chair, he's only making $125. So his profit from chairs is $125 per chair. All right. Now, if he sold 25 chairs, how much profit did he make? Well, he made 125 times 25. That's 5, that's 2, that's 2, that's 1, that's 6, that's 0, that's 0, that's 1, that's 5, and that's 2. So 5, 2, 1, 1, 3. So that means he made $3,125 from the chairs. But remember that each week he has a fixed expense. Remember, expenses have to be taken away from our profit. So far, this is how much we made from the chairs minus how much money we had to spend to make the chairs. So now, regardless, he has to give away like $1,000 in rent. So this is the profit that he made from the chairs, right? This is all the money he made from the chairs, given how expensive they are to make. Now, that money doesn't just go in his pocket. From that money, $1,250 has to come out because, he has to pay rent or utilities for his fixed cost. So there's a cost to making chairs, and there's also a cost to exist in this shop. This is the cost to exist in the shop. So now this subtracts, that turns into 5, 2, 10, 12, 7, 8, 1. So this turns into a profit for the week of $1,875, right? Which is going to be choice 1. All right. Using the approximation 2.54 centimeters is equal to 1 inch, how many centimeters are in 4 feet and 7 inches? Okay, so here's our conversion, 2.54 cm to 1 inch. And here we have 4 feet plus 7 inches. So obviously, I only know the conversion between centimeters and inches. So I don't want feet. I don't want to deal with feet. Remember that there's 12 inches for 1 foot. So if I have 4 feet, I just multiply 12 by 4, because I multiply 1 by 4 to get 4. So I multiply 12 inches by 4, because there's 1 foot has 12 inches, so we have 4 of those, so that's 48 inches in total. So there's 48 inches. So 4 feet is 48 inches plus 7 inches, which gives us a total of 55, I think, but I could be wrong. That's 515. Yep, 55 inches. So now, how many centimeters is 55 inches? Well, if I have 55 over here, and I want to find how many centimeters, so that's x centimeters, guess what? I can cross multiply. X times 1 is x, and that's equal to 254 times 55. Don't forget about the decimal. That's 0, that's 2, that's 7, that's 2, that's 1, that's 2, that's 0, that's 0, that's 2, that's 7, that's 2, that's 1, that's 2. So this turns into 07931, and then you would move the decimal point 1 and 2, and you get 139.70 centimeters in 4 feet and 7 inches. That's all you have to do here, just a bunch of multiplication. All right, moving on. It says on the number line above, JK is equal to 3 1/2, JM is equal to 9 3/4, and LM is equal to 1/8, and we want to know the position at point L. All right, so let's draw this out over here. So here we have J, here we have K, which is 3/8, here we have L, and here we have M. Okay, so we know the distance between J and K is 3 1/2. We know the distance between J and M, which is the total distance, by the way, between J and M, is 9 3/4. Sorry. Let's restart that. I didn't mean to delete everything, but let's just restart it. So here's J, here's K, here's L, and here's M. JK is 3 1/2. JM, the total distance here, we know is 9 3/4, and we know that LM, this distance right here, is 1 1/8, essentially. So I know that K is located at the position 3/8. Okay, and I want to find the position of K. Sorry, I want to find the position of point L, essentially, right? L is right here. Now, the closest point here is K. So technically, if I find the distance of KL, I could just add that to 3/8 to figure out where L is, right? For example, if the distance of KL was 2, that means that L is just 2 units away from K, which means the position of L is just 2 units away from K. 2 units away from 3/8 is 2 3/8. You just add it. So in order to find the distance, I'm going to have to take this chunk out of 9 3/4, and then I'm going to subtract this chunk out of 9 3/4 as well, so that way I can find KL and then add that back to 3/8. So I want to actually find this chunk of distance, which they didn't give me. So in order to find that, I need to subtract 3 1/2 from 9 3/4, right? So the way that I would like to do that, honestly, is just to convert it into decimal, right? 3 1/2 is 3.5. That seems the easiest to me. You can keep it as a fraction if you want. I just want to do this quickly and go to bed. So here we have 3.5. 9 3/4 is 9.75. So 9.75 minus 3.50, that's going to be 6.25. Yep, that makes sense. So now the distance between K and M is what we found. So we essentially took this out of the equation. We subtracted this point away. So now, instead of the distance from here to here being 9 3/4, we know the distance from this point to this point is 6.25, or 6 1/4. Okay? Now, we also know that the distance between L and M is 1/8. So from this pink distance, we have to get rid of this black distance so that we can get to the yellow and add that distance to K to get the point L. All right, so now we know that 1 1/8 is equal to 1.125, okay? So if I have 6.25 or 6.250 and I subtract that from 1.125, what do I get? This is 4, this turns into 10, that turns into 5, this turns into 2, 1, 5. The distance between k and L is 5.125 or 5 1/8. Remember that conversion. I told you, I don't lie, guys. I told you that conversion is important. 0.125 is equal to 1/8. So 5 1/8 is equal to 5.125. So now I have 5 1/8, and I'm essentially adding that to 5 3/8. Sorry, I'm starting at 3/8, and I'm adding to it 5 1/8. So I can set this whole number aside, and I can just deal with the fractions. So 3/8 plus 1/8 is equal to 4/8, which is 1/2. So this is 5 1/2. That's the position, which is choice C. So all we did here was we added the distance to get to the next point. If the distance between K and L is 5.125, then L is just 5.125 plus the already known position of K. So that's all I did here. Now, did I do it in the most neat way on the screen? No, I'm sorry, guys. But literally all I did here was I added decimals and then remembered what decimal was equal to what fraction. That's all. All right. Moving on to number 112. We're almost over, thankfully. Or we're almost done. So if 4x minus 3y is equal to 12, what is x in terms of y? So they're asking us what is x, so just solve for x. So I want to solve for x. I want to get x on its own, so I'm going to add 3y on both sides. So now I'm left with 4x is equal to 3y plus 12. You could have also done 12 plus 3y. These two are the same thing. I just looked at my answer choices and I realized that y comes first, so I wrote y as first. Remember commutative property of addition? 12 plus 3y and 3y plus 12 are the same thing. With addition, you can write it any way around. With subtraction, you cannot. So I want to find x, not 4x, so I can just divide both sides by 4. I get x, these cancel out, so I get x is equal to 3y over 4 plus 12 over 4. So just add the 4 to both of these numbers, and that's equal to 3 over 4y. You can pop the y out and just attach it to the side of this fraction, and we know that 12 divided by 4 is automatically 3. So this is the same thing as saying x is equal to 3/4 y plus 3, which is choice C. All right. And finally, oh no, not finally, question 113. Got too excited. All right. So here it says there's 20 students in the class. The frequency shows the number of students in the class who ate 0, 1, 2, 3, or 5 servings of fruits and veggies yesterday. What is the mean number of servings of fruit and veggies that were eaten yesterday? So we're finding a mean. We did this in a previous part of this video. We're just going to add the total number of entries and divide it by the total number of people making that entries. So 5 students ate 0 veggies. So I'm just going to do 5 times 0. Remember, multiply the frequency by the value. Then 7 students ate 1 serving. So that would be 7 times 1. 3 students ate 2 servings. So that would be 3 times 2. 4 students ate 3 servings. So that would be 4 times 3. 0 students ate 4 servings. So that would be 0 times 4. That's the same thing as just adding nothing, right? Because no student did this. And finally, 1 student who's super healthy ate 5 servings. So this is equal to 0. This is equal to 7, 6, 12, 0, and 5. And we have to add all these up together. So 7 plus 6 is 13. 13 plus 12 is 25. 25 plus 0 is 25. And 25 plus 5 is 30. So the total sum of all servings is 30. But now we have to calculate the total number of students. So 5 plus 7 is 12. 12 plus 3 is 15. 15 plus 4 is 19. And 19 plus 1 is 20. So the average, or the mean, is 30 over 20, which is the same thing if I divide the top and the bottom by 10. Same thing as saying 3 over 2, all right? Which is the same thing. Well, think about it this way, right? How many times does 2 go into 3? It goes in 1 full time, and then you have a remainder of 1. That means that the 1 1/2 servings of fruit has to be the mean. So again, you need to know how to convert an improper fraction, where the numerator is bigger than the denominator, into a mixed number like that, okay? So we'll go ahead and with our arrow, select choice A, right? Done. Moving on to the last question. I'm really excited for this question because I get to end the video. But let B equal to 3, let C equal to 4, and let D equal to 5. Find the value of C over D divided by C over B plus C over D. All right, this sounds hard. All we're doing is we're just plugging in these values, right? So C is 4, D is 5, so this turns into 4/5 divided by C, which is 4, and B, which is 3. Okay, so all we did here was we looked at this and we plugged in values. Okay, now remember, whenever you have two fractions like a over b divided by c over d, that's the same thing as saying a over b division symbol c over d. Same thing. So how about we just chillax here and take this bottom denominator and just move it to the top and then just write down the division symbol. So now instead of having this crazy double-decker fraction, we just have 4/5 divided by 4/3. Remember, keep, change, flip. So we'll go ahead and we'll keep this the same, 4 over 5. We'll change this division to a multiplication, and we'll flip this last one into 3 over 4. 4 and 4 are the same number. They can cancel out. This turns into 1, this turns into 1, and we're left with 3/5. Is that my answer? No. Because in addition to this crazy double-decker fraction, which is actually equal to 3/5, I need to add c over d. C is 4, d is 5. So I have to add 4/5. This is equal to 7 over 5. And then we need to turn this into 1 and 2/5. How do I do that? Well, 5 goes into 7 one time, and it has a remainder of 2. So we just leave that remainder over what we divided it by, which was 5. If you guys don't know how to convert mixed numbers back into fractions, you multiply the denominator by the whole number. So that would be 5. 1 times 5 is 5, and you add the numerator. And that becomes your new numerator. So 5 plus 2 is 7. 7 over 5 is the mixed fraction, which is what we got. So to type in our answer, we click the mixed number button. All right. Or actually, I'm going to clear this. I'm going to move. Oh, I guess they want us into a fraction only. So we can just put 7 over 5 as our answer here. I guess they didn't want it in a mixed number form. So keep it like that, right? If it doesn't allow you to put in a mixed number, then don't put in a mixed number. So that's the answer to number 114. That's the last question on this section. And that's also going to be the end of this video. I'm going to call it a night. Please, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. I'm going to try and get to them as quickly as possible. I hope that this was of help to anyone that's studying for this exam, even if you're a 9th grader taking a 9th grade SHSAT. Doing 8th grade practice problems isn't a bad choice. It's not a bad idea. 80% about 80% of the 9th grade SHSAT math section is just the 8th grade SHSAT math section, as I remember it. So essentially, I hope you understood that nothing really changed with this test. The only thing that changed is instead of looking and crying at a piece of paper, you're looking and crying at a computer screen. Only thing that changed. The types of questions are the same, right? They ask you to do the exact same thing. Divide, multiply, look at a fraction, look at a decimal, find x, divide by 5, divide 5x by 10. It's asking you to do the same thing, just on a digital format. Don't get scared by it. You guys are going to do great on this test. I will be uploading a review of another math section from a different official practice test. If you guys really want me to do that, let me know in the comments down below so I know that it's what's the word? So I know it's welcomed and necessary. Other than that, I hope you guys have a nice night. I hope you learned something. If you like this video, please leave a like and please subscribe if it did help you. It really helps me. But yeah, hope this was helpful. Please leave questions and I'll see you guys later.